Greetings gamers and welcome to the 116th livestream from the Misfit Gamer Studios. I'm your host Vortex and this is D&D Discussions. On today's episode we are going to be covering a very large topic today because we are going to be discussing the history of the Druid class. And it's not just going to be the history of the Druid class. Oh no. Because this particular topic today is not just going to cover the history of the Druid, but it's also just kind of by its very nature, no pun intended, is going to be covering the history of Wildshape, the history of Druid hierarchy and the limitations that came with it across the editions, and the history of Druid circles, because no, they didn't always mean the same thing as they do in 5th edition, which I just found absolutely fantastic as I'm building this and realizing just how many hours we're about to put in. But that is that is what is been chosen by you guys. We did a poll in the Discord and it was chosen at a very last minute vote that we were going to do the history of Druids today. So as we begin, we don't have any major updates. Everything was kind of announced last Monday. We now have sub emotes that are available. We have new commands, by the way. If you hit exclamation point commands in chat, it'll show you all of the commands that you can now do in chat. And then of course we have the channel points. We also have channel currency that you guys are adding or getting in the background. So yeah, that's pretty much basically everything that's been announced recently. If you want the official announcements, you can check back on our most recent episodes. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. We are going to have to dive into this topic pretty soon. We've already gotten a late start. But yeah, we're excited. I'm excited. I hope you're excited.
I'm incredibly excited. Chill on my friends, you know. I'm stoked, man. We got little emotes and everything. We got fun stuff happening. Like we are moving and grooving, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for it. It's a good time.
Got so many people in chat right now.
I know.
Cosmic's here. We got I saw Hecate in there. Hualepa just showed up. What's going on? How's
Beautiful.
everybody doing? Love to see everybody in there. Puns are always intended. Absolutely. Druid subclasses. We may be touching a little bit here and there when it was mentioned. And I do have a bit of information in terms of the where is it? I just want to make sure. I don't want to mention something. In terms of subclasses, did I grab the information? I keep the information about 5th edition. Because I did look it up, but I wasn't sure if we really wanted to go through all the circles.
I mean,
like,
I can run through just what the circles are called that we have like thus far.
I had them in my notes. I just wasn't sure if I wanted to cover them, so I want to see if I kept them in my notes or did I actually ditch them. That's still talking about the hierarchy. I gotta go through all of these notes. That was their alignment. I did take out specifically all of the different circles just because I felt like, you know, most people know what the 5th edition versions are. But yes, we can always go over the circles at the very end just to kind of get an idea of what are the approaches, at least, right? So if you want to prep that by the end, by the time we get to 5th edition, just
most definitely
the names and just give us a general principle of what, you know, we don't need to go through like what they get, but just the general guiding principle,
like the ideas.
Yeah, because that's going to be the most important thing when we get to 5th edition is how did they split up the guiding principles and the direction of Druids. So that's what we're going to want to have prepped. So yeah, we'll get that one there. Let's see what's going on. Fennekin Pokemon plushie. What is the Fennekin? I'm not familiar with the Fennekin Pokemon.
I am not sure myself.
I don't know which Pokemon that is. But that's awesome. Those are always great. The plushie, like I remember growing up with like Beanie Babies as like the high quality, and now seeing like the quality of plushies now, especially with like being able to get involved with, you know, your favorite pop culture, you know, kind of like how it's like what are those called? The Funko Pops are cool, but I'm not a huge fan of them. I much prefer a plushie over a Funko Pop. You know what I mean?
That's fair. That's fair.
100%. I'll take a plushie over a Funko Pop any day. Yeah, circles are definitely a roundabout topic.
Wild.
Subclasses. So Druid subclasses as wildfire subclasses.
Wildfire, there is a wildfire subclass, and it was a very
Interesting.
controversial. It's the only druid subclass that allows you to cast certain fire spells.
I mean, no, it does make sense though, because in the entire cycle of things, you would need a druid who understands that. Like, I mean, because in reality, we know that wildfires are a good part of the entire cycle of nature.
Exactly,
for a
very
forest.
necessary for the cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
So similar to how you would have very few but necessary necromancers, you could have very few but necessary wildfire. Okay, I like that concept. That's cool. That's cool.
Just I posted a little in Discord of the whatever it's called, the Pokemon. Just it looks kind of like
that one.
It looks kind of like, what's that one that has all the? It kind of looks like an Eevee.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
but
it
not
looks,
exactly.
It looks almost like a
Little
Eevee
cutesy.
meets Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
In a way,
Wait.
You know, no, but I have seen that one. Cosmic said it's a 6th generation. Oh yeah, that's way past. Like I know.
Yeah,
I wasn't even into Pokemon like ever. Let alone like, I don't even know how many. I didn't even know there was on 6 editions, right? Like 6 generations.
Right.
It's just like 100 when it first came out. What was it, like 150 original? I thought that was too many when it first came out. I was like 150, and you guys know them all by name.
Get the heck out of here.
Nowadays, it's like not even a question. Like you need an app. You need your own Pokedex just to understand.
Yes, you need your own
Like,
Pokedex.
oh man, I think there's more types of Pokemon than I could even memorize.
Right. Oh my goodness gracious.
But it is a fire type. They had just a pyromaniac. Yeah, just a pyromaniac at heart. So it's fine. If it involves fire, it's good.
Yes. I mean, everyone needs to burn some things.
So today, yes, we will be talking about the hippie furry class today.
Hey, get you some.
Actually, funny enough, that actually isn't a terrible way to describe druids. The hippie furry class.
I mean, lightweight. Listen, after all of the insanity that I heard right after, what's that game? The D&D game.
Oh, yeah, Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's
3
Gate. After
with-
Baldur's Gate 3 came out, like it just people went hard. Like,
People-
wait.
Phrasing.
All right, listen here. But facts.
151 original Pokemon. Excuse me.
Okay. Okay.
That's about like 100 too many for me to bother with.
Facts.
Now we have over 1,000. Yeah, no, like, and the fact that there are people who probably legitimately know all of them by name, but then again, that's no different. I guess it's like it sounds surprising, right? But that's no different than a sports nut who can tell you every team member, or every player on any team in their sport, and they'll have stats.
Yo, one of my buddies is such a music head. Like, it's almost regardless of what genre you're talking about, he can like rattle off like artists in that genre, like who was in the top 10 hits of that year.
That's
like
insane,
it just got all this knowledge about every, and I'm like, I don't know how you remember all this stuff.
Right.
Like, it's wild. Get you some.
But everybody has their thing that
Yes,
that
that is
triggers their
true.
memory, you know
That
what I
is
mean?
true.
Like that's
They're
absolutely
nerddom,
insane.
just going nuts.
Yeah, 1,000 plus Pokemon. Jesus. Is the only fire type that you like? I mean, that's got to say something. There's got to be. I mean, out of 1,000, there's got to be at least 100 fire types. I'm assuming they're like 100 of each, major type plus all the others.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I mean, that's a pretty long list, of to go through for
gracious.
favorites. But again, I have no idea how creative can they have gotten at this point. You know what I mean? Like after so many Pokemon of the same type, how can you get creative with what they can do and their personalities? Like, I got to imagine at this point, it's more about how they look than anything else. Like, I have to imagine they can't be that drastically unique. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely off base here.
Listen,
But it just seems like after a while, you'd start to like run the gambit of what could qualify.
There's
as
nothing
something
new under the sun,
right?
It's all been done before.
I mean, yeah, because you have the alternate forms, you have like the evolutions and everything. But it's like,
Yeah.
in terms of like for instance, turn Pokemon in game, and if I owned every fire Pokemon and then use them all, would I really get a different experience each and every time? Or is there going to be a point to where I'm like, oh, that one's like that one. Oh, that one's like these. Like, would I start to be able to basically group them together in these are the flamethrower type and these are the bomb type and then these are, you know what I mean? Like, I'm wondering what is the relevance to that versus is it more intricate than that? Is it, yes, they all have like rotating attacks, but it's the attacks comboed with their resistances, comboed with their strengths, like
that actually make the gameplay different and unique for each one of the. Yeah,
right.
I totally get
so
that.
while you may only have, out of the 100 that you may only have, let's say, 10 unique attacks through all 100, but you're going to have different resistances, right? And that can be jumbled up in different combos. So you could essentially have an infinite number of combinations, but do they actually do that to an extent that makes them feel unique and worth it? Or is it just, again, that whole collect them because it has a new name and it looks different, And that's where I'm just, because again, I don't have any basis. I never played Pokemon. I have a very rough knowledge of it. I get it. It's been around long enough that I know about it, but I've never, it's just one of those IPs that I never dove into. It never caught my, that. What was the other one? It had a close competitor many years ago. Digimon was in the one.
Digital Monsters.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't really get into that one. Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of, I guess, in the same ballpark.
So I will say I played Yu-Gi-Oh cards and I used to watch the cartoon, but that was like,
I mean, I know they're not like in the same universe, but same ballpark of
very, very similar, because like you had all the Pokemon cards, but then you also had all the Pokemon video games. Right. Now the other video games were more you playing the card game and like Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff like that. But
the idea of that type of game strategy, where you collect the things to then use them in combat in various things, or in various combinations. Like I did that in real life with Magic the Gathering, and it just. Yeah, obviously it only lasted while I was, basically deployed. So it's like, it's one of those situations where, I don't know, those kind of games just don't intrigue me to grind to collect, to then use in very specific situations to go grind and collect, to solve another very specific situation to go grind and collect. That kind of gameplay just doesn't appeal to me. So Pokemon was just an IP I just never quite grasped in terms of its intricacies. I get its appeal. I don't necessarily look at it as something that I'm confused on why it's popular. It was just one of those things that it got popular well without me. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
Well without my
That's
involvement.
Fair.
And
it was just
one of those things
I did not jump on the train or whatever. You watched everybody else. Well, I guess that does look fun.
Oh yeah, and there's tons of things.
Enjoy that.
That happens to me quite a bit with like movies, TV shows. Like I'm that kind of person. I don't get involved in fads very often. I'm not interested when a bunch of people are suddenly like excited about something. It's just more of a, okay, but why should I be, aside from the fact that all of you are? Because everyone's like, oh, but you got to, everyone's watching it. It's like, okay, why is it good? Well, everybody's watching it and talking about it. Stop. Why is it good? What? Because you know how many things I've wasted my time on because it was popular, and then you find out 6 months later, everybody hates it, and you're like, then why were we talking about it? And you're like, I don't know, it was the thing to watch. And you're like, so we all collectively hated wasting all of our time so we could talk about how much we hated it. I'm done with this game. Like literally, I got into that cycle of like, we literally voluntarily made ourselves
miserable,
waste time just to talk about no. I can't do that.
I don't need to live my life like that.
No. I will say, like, I'll get onto fads the years later, like, TV shows or whatever. I'll watch them. I'm like, oh, I totally get why it was so important and why it was so groundbreaking, but I didn't need to be waiting every single week for that. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
It's not my deal. So maybe I'm completely off base with the whole Pokemon thing. I could absolutely be wrong about that. Correct me in chat if you can about the intricacies of Pokemon. There might be more because of another Pokemon game. So even more. We're already over 1,000. Let's just add more.
Wow.
Because I mean, more is better, right? We don't need to.
Is it though?
Like, can we get like I'm also curious. Does Pokemon have an in-game reason for the ever continuing expansion of Pokemon? Did it like start in a region and the explanation for more Pokemon is that they're traveling further across the planet, or is it time? Is a time passing and therefore more Pokemon are evolving and being discovered? And is it just that? Is the entirety of Pokemon over a long course of time and therefore its discovery and evolution? Is it regional based? It's just taking place in different locations that have different Pokemon? Or is it kind of like Final Fantasy where every iteration's in the same universe loosely,
but slightly different?
They're all roughly different versions of that universe, right? Kind of like the Zelda theory, right? They're all just alternative universes of the same place, right? I'm not really sure, I understand, right? Because it's like you had the 151. So how does that factor into modern day? Where were the others? Is it just explain that you just didn't travel far enough, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm just really curious, like, how is it that we can get from 151 to 1,000 and they're still going to add more? Like, where are these coming from? I get it. You take the real world. We're still discovering, animals, but the way that you interact with Pokemon is like you're walking around town and there's a Pokemon, you get it in the grass. Like, so did I just never see those other 99 Pokemon that are grass types in town before?
I mean, you could say that until they were discovered and introduced into, what do you call, like dogs and cats, right? Like you eventually domesticate them and bring them into like our society, and then you'll find them out there in the wild. But until they've been initially brought in, now, yeah,
because I'm just really curious, what would, like, if they were to come out, maybe they've already had, correct? Let me know in chat if this has already happened. But I'm like curious, what would a prequel Pokemon look like? Like, what would a Pokemon set 20, 30, 50, 100 years before the original, before Dr. Oak Professor Oak gave you the first three choices, before Ash, like go 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years before Ash? What would the world of Pokemon look like based on what we understand how it's grown now? I don't know if they've done this before, where they've done a past history shot, but I'm just curious, is there a way that they explain how this all works, and what would that entail for a prequel?
You could probably, hey, listen, here's the deal. Bet money that they will find a way to expand the amount of Pokemon that there was in the past, and then just be like, oh, these all got wiped out just before like Ash and them and whatever, and that's why we only have these.
Mewtwo is what just did it all.
And so it's just like,
because they've introduced gods, right? Like, we've actually learned like Pokemon are like the gods of the realm, right? Or there is a god Pokemon. Like, it's just,
I think so.
50% complete. Oh my gosh, and today's the last day. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it, but I will take this into account, y'all. That community challenge will be re-upped for next month.
Oh, I'm
going to lower it to a much more, because we got 50% this month. So I think I'm going to lower it to maybe 6,000 for next month. That's much, we got 5,000.
Okay.
So maybe next month we'll lower it down to 6,000.
That sounds doable.
Go for it again. That'll still be a little extra, a little bit more than we tried this time. But I still like that being a rotating challenge, where every month they can do this community challenge to work on an additional stream.
Got you.
Right.
I like that.
I really like having that as a rotating thing, because then it gives you guys an opportunity to let us know what you want us to talk about, right? Other than submitting topics in Discord and waiting for us to talk about them.
Fair enough.
But Pokemon is one of those IPs. Again, never got into it. I know that there's so much that they did with it, but I can't.
I take it like I take a lot of the other IPs that are out there that I'm not as in depth with. I'm just like, I take it at face value. Like, my lady wanted to watch the Detective Pikachu movie. And it was an interesting watch. I learned a little bit about, some Pokemon lore that I didn't know before, but you just say yes and with whatever's on the screen. So
Soul says that it's more or less a regional thing. So the way that it seems to be explained in the games is you are always in a different location. So those different locations are different Pokemon. So this new one that they're mentioning, Pokemon ZA, is supposed to be take place in a place called Luminos City, which I guess is going to be their version of Paris.
Okay.
So again, that's making more sense if it's more of you've only explored a part of the world, so you've only seen part of their animals. Totally makes more sense.
Okay.
Right?
I'm here for it.
And that could explain why you could see the same types, the more common types everywhere, right? You see cats on every continent, but you don't necessarily see kangaroos on every continent.
Very true.
So that kind of makes sense why you might be able to see a Pikachu and a Charizard everywhere, but you might not see, what was the one? I already forgot how to say that.
Ditto, Mewtwo.
Cosmic's favorite. The
freaking Fennekin.
It was in chat somewhere.
Yeah, it's right above. I guess you don't see that.
Yeah, see, I don't see all of it. I have to go. The Fennekin. You were right. The Fennekin. Yeah. So it's like, I guess that would make sense that you could explain it easily just by
Regional.
Okay.
Easy enough.
Yeah, good.
Well.
All right. Well, that was a nice little introduction.
Introductory tangent.
All right. So we have a huge amount to talk about today. I'm not going to try and rush today. We don't have any need to rush, but I am also not trying to have a 6-hour stream tonight.
Fair enough.
So keep in mind, we have a lot to cover. Like I mentioned in the intro, we are not just covering the history of Druid, but in order to make sure that we do that, we have to go over Wild Shape, and we are going to be talking about Wild Shape as it evolved. We're going to be talking about the hierarchy of Druids and how that influenced being a Druid and building a Druid throughout the history. And we're also going to be talking about Druid circles, because they've mentioned Druid circles throughout each edition, but they meant slightly different things.
I'm very interested to see what that means.
So yeah, so it's going to be a lot. I've tried to organize it as best I can in terms of talking about each individual section. Mostly we're going to be going through each edition. First, the origins. We're going to talk about the original origins, because I did misspeak slightly when we did the history of prestige classes. I mentioned that Druid first came up in first edition as one of these precursor prestige classes.
Right.
Now, it didn't have, unlike the Bard, it didn't have any prerequisites. It was just a somewhat of a subclass, if you were, a prerequisite to a subclass of Cleric, right? It was an alternative to Cleric that had prerequisites of skills. Subscription. Thank you, Soul. Thank you so much for the subscription. I appreciate that.
Much appreciated. That's one. Oh, look at
awesome.
Our chat is blown up.
So
I love
crazy
that.
with that.
I freaking love that.
But yeah, so Druid had like some prerequisites for their ability stat, their stat scores and their abilities, right? But those were all precursors to what would come later, the prestige class that was announced in third edition. But apparently Druids existed before first edition.
Okay.
I had thought that that's where they started, but apparently we're going to talk about a little bit about their origin. And then we're going to go into each edition. Each edition, we're going to be covering various aspects. We're going to be covering their spell casting, or as I mentioned, their shape shifting, which again, we didn't have Wild Shape at first. It was called shape shifting. It wasn't even called Wild Shape.
Okay.
Various things about the hierarchy, the alignment, how they do combat, the spells. We're going to be talking about various types of spells, just examples to kind of show you the direction and the focus that they did. And then once we go through all of the editions and kind of cover all of the various aspects of that, we will then move into, we will then be ending with a kind of play-by-play summarized version of the alignment limitations and kind of the thoughts and focuses about why each of those editions had certain alignment requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be going over that.
That's
and
fair.
After that, we'll finally end it on the actual origins of the hierarchy and lore-based hierarchy, because as you guys will see when we go through the rest of it, the hierarchy was much more of a restriction in earlier editions and then became more of a tool for lore in the later editions. So it was an actual mechanic that constricted the build, and then it just became here's what DMs can use to talk about it.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's why we're actually going to go over a whole section of how the hierarchy works. And that's how we will end it, because it basically ends with that.
Okay. Alrighty.
So I hope everybody straps in. I hope you all are ready, because here we go with the history of Druid. Normally I would ask Kage what he knows about the history of Druid, but I don't think we have time for that. I don't think we have any more time to figure out what you may or may not know.
Let's get into it.
All right.
I'm here for it.
So here we are starting. Druid's the first class that you ever played as. Oh, interesting. That is awesome. First class I ever played at was the fighter rogue, of course.
Very nice. First class I ever played in was a bender.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You had the actual custom class too.
Right.
Lucky you. All right. So let's talk about the actual origins of the Druid class. So one thing that I always, like to look at is where the source material before they got it, right? Because we've been starting to talk about that a little bit more on stream about the sources that the source books, got from. And obviously Druids were much more focused on the mythical lore of the real world, more also highly leaned into on actual Celtic folklore is where they wanted to get the initial Druid inspirations from. So keep that in mind, especially when we talk about the hierarchy, especially when we talk about some of the limitations and why this wasn't just a core class. you got to think about, again, before the internet, before it was easy to get a bunch of, pop culture references. A lot of it was just what you could read, right? What was actual knowledge at the time, and how do you make that into a game? Now we have years and years of people playtesting, homebrewing, and doing various things. But back then it was just there's this magical person in all of these lores. How do we make that into a role playable character? Right. So just want to preface that, because it is really important to know the specifics about why that came from there. And of course, it was always meant to be a character that was based on a connection of nature. So we'll get into how that was meant to be represented as well. So the actual first inclusion of what we now know as the Druid class, it was never a core class up until later editions, but even before first edition, it actually made its appearance a year before in the supplemental number 3, the Eldritch Wizardry book.
Eldritch Wizardry?
Yes.
Wizardry, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So while first edition officially launched in 77, this book came out in 76. So a year before first edition officially launched, the supplemental released, and it had some basic descriptions of what would eventually become the Druid class.
Okay.
Now in this initial supplemental, from the things that I was able to pull from it, this was initially a subclass of cleric, or a derivative of cleric. Now remember, we've talked about this before when we talked about previous classes, but in earlier editions, subclasses weren't what we think of them today, right? Back in the day, you have to remember, warrior was the class. Fighter was technically what they would consider the subclass. Right? Rogue was a class, thief was a subclass. Now, granted, they didn't treat them like subclasses the way that we do, but the idea was more of, you had these broad umbrellas, and those umbrellas were typically like the XP table that you would follow, and certain rule sets, but like what hit die you would get. Those are the umbrella things,
right?
And then the subclasses really were just more identifiers of the direction you would take the character. Again, very minimally what we consider a subclass now, but not to the extent of specialties where you and I could be drastically different fighters.
Right.
We would be fighters in the sense of, we're warriors who want to use weapons, but another fighter could be an unarmed fighter, right? That would be a slightly different build, but they weren't really toying around with that. But yeah, I digress. Just keep in mind that subclasses were a different language back then.
Exactly.
So when they say it's a subclass of cleric, it's not a subclass like we think of now, where it's cleric, and then you have this, somehow a cleric gets a specialty into druid. It was just cleric was the umbrella, and then like priest was a subclass. Druid was a subclass of cleric, if that's making more sense. So that's where it first came out, and then all right, so this is where we began a lot of the foundations that we're going to see in the next couple editions. So this is where we started out with requiring the maintenance of a neutral alignment.
Okay.
And it started out as just neutral. So this is going to be kind of important, because we're going to see a little bit more of the influences that they wanted in terms of balancing. And when we saw, because we talked a little bit about OD&D, and we talk more about, first edition and on, right? And we know that first edition really tried to nail down things that were easy. Well, I don't want to say easy to explain, but things that could be explained and things that could be reproduced, via rules. So at first it was just neutral alignment. And essentially it was just representing a balance between good and evil, recognizing that, there needed to be both to have harmonious, right? Like, so growing up in the forest, there's predator and prey. You need to recognize that not everything can or should be saved, even if you have the ability.
That was going to be a question when you said neutral. Is this specifically the neutrality between good and evil, or is it additionally the neutrality between chaos and order?
So this one is the idea between good and evil and law and chaos. So it wasn't quite as dramatic as requiring true neutral as the later editions would define it. And we'll get into again, that's more of when they define the ideals behind character creation. Alignment really became a fundamental, so true neutral versus just being neutral. But again, a lot of this was in these early editions highly leaned on for the player. Like these were highly pushed to the player to be role played, right? These were characteristics that you were to keep in mind as you developed relationships and made choices. Again, the idea that you understand that, the lion will take down the antelope. Like, that's going to happen. That the sick prey will be the ones that are targeted. You may have the ability, right? If a wounded animal comes to you, you may have the ability to heal it and let it go one day. But as you see that same thing being, a similar animal being wounded, but simultaneously being hunted, you may not step in, right? Because the nature of things, the balance of things is it was wounded in the hunt and it will go to the hunt. Whereas if something's just wounded, say by a hunter, in a hunter's arrow or a hunter's trap, you may give that animal life back because guess what? It got away. So you're trying, there's the idea of neutrality doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take, always the wrong choice, but it's the idea of what makes it neutral, right? The idea, we've talked about this before in a previous episode of why being true neutral is a difficulty in my opinion. Yes. And there's a lot of different ways to put it. I've always, you can use the exaggerated one like I did where, your party's fighting, a bandit group and then it becomes an unequal fight. But that's a little bit different because you're talking about survival. But, the difference between, let's say you have a town, right, that you want to save, your hometown. Let's say there's some rebels that are going to come in and they're going to do a lot of bad stuff. They're going to hurt a lot of good people, innocent people, because they don't like the king. So you decide to help your hometown, right? So you go to the king and say, hey, we're going to help. And the king's like, cool. And you have the choice, right? You somehow have the choice to either set up barricades and try to defend the town and try to hold them back and do as little destruction as possible, just hold them back enough to make them not want to keep coming back. Or they give you an option to sneak into their bandit camp and slaughter them.
Kill them all. Yes.
As a druid, yes, you want to protect your own town. But the balance is in, well, guess what? You guys need rebels. You need people to tell you when you're out of balance. Getting rid of your opposition doesn't create balance. I want to save my hometown. I want to do my mission. But no, I don't want to imbalance the world by making my mission to genocide, right? So that's why, like, for something like a true neutral druid would be difficult in a party, because the party would go there and be like, hey, you could do A or B. A is going to be extremely difficult. It's going to be a very long combat session, and many of you could die. B, it's going to be easy rolls, and you guys are basically going to walk through it. A true neutral character would really make that party's decision hard, because a true neutral would be like, if you two, and then the true neutral may even go so far as to say, I won't join you, but if you choose to go do that,
I'll probably warn them.
I might warn them, because again, it's not that I'm going to go against you, right? Like, and so does that make sense when I said, like, when you're fighting bandits, if it goes off?
No, that very much makes sense, because it's
not
the mindset is, it's like, hey, I understand what we're trying to do, like, and I have a very similar perspective. I have a similar goal in the end, but at the end of the day, like, the way we go about it, you can go about it with honor, you can go about it with dishonor, right?
Exactly.
And so, if you are out here and you're trying to, yes, I get the idea if you want to exterminate, but that's like, you think about all these they want to exterminate all their competition, so they're the only ones, right? You are playing a dangerous game thinking that way, and so
that's
it's
why
like,
true neutral can be a very difficult one, because it does require you to, like, some people say chaotic is harder to do, but chaotic characters are just hard for people who like to think through their choices, right? Like, the hardest part about being a chaotic character is not considering consequences and just doing on impulse. Like, that's, most people want to think that chaotic is spontaneous and crazy. It's just lack of consequence. They don't care, right? It's, oh, you insulted me, I'm going to punch you. I don't care that the town guard's right there. Mm-hmm. I don't care that violence is not acceptable. I don't care that we're trying to hide. Like, that's a chaotic character, right? A chaotic character goes in disguise because you're sneaking into a town and does something to blow your cover, not intentionally to blow your cover, but because doing the thing that they needed to do, they didn't, the consequence of blowing their cover wasn't there. that's a chaotic character, which is hard for some people to play. But that, as much as that can cause twists in a campaign, it rarely puts you against your whole party. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas true neutrality, in the sense of, well, we're just going to go slaughter these people, a true neutral character might stand up against you, or go join, or go warn, or just back off, right? It's one of those things, it's one of those rare times where you may have to tell your party no, and not just no, I'm not going to join in.
But no, I'm about to fuck you up if you keep going down this road.
You know, I mean, again, imagine a druid whose party thinks also imagine a druid whose party thinks it's okay to burn down a forest. You are going to turn around and be like, no, I don't care if it's not even my forest. You're not burning this forest down. So a druid in a campaign, you might be fighting the BBEG, but if you go to cast Fireball, the druid might turn on you. He might end your concentration or stop you from doing that spell because he can't allow you to burn the forest, right? Even though it's not a neutral move, it's the idea of you can't allow such a potential destruction of the forest just to get the BBEG. Unless you know for sure the BBG will kill the forest. You know what I mean? It's that balance of I can't risk it, even if it's for the BBEG.
It'd be really weird as if like there was a druid that just had this like weird sixth sense. Anytime somebody was about to cast some sort of like fire magic or something, like specifically fire magic, like in a forest that's
right.
very. And imagine that was the only time that they could cast counterspell. Because like they don't really get a counterspell or anything like that, but like they can try and counterspell somebody doing some fuck shit like that in their forest specifically, especially because they don't get fire spells unless you're a wildfire druid.
I mean,
you know, like
especially if you just added it to a ritual where if you spent 24 hours in a location, you can like meditate and make a grove.
It's your grove, yes. And like if that's your grove,
you can sense fire magic, and if it's going off, you can counterspell it, and if it's already going off, you at least know where the fire is.
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of some cool stuff. Yeah,
very interesting.
Okay, so that's where the original origin of the neutrality came from, right? It was law and chaos, good and evil. It was a balancing thing, right? It wasn't so much about intent. It wasn't about keeping score, right? Just because you tipped this guy doesn't mean you have to shaft the next guy.
Right.
It's a greater understanding of balance. It's not every individual choice, but it's also not just the aggregate, right? You can't just be a murder hobo, but say, but in the end of the day, I'm still a good guy, right? You have to find that balance of it is every decision can be there, but you're not like constantly being like, man, well, should I tip this guy? Because if I tip him 10%, will that give him too much money? Will he quit his job? If I give him 5%, will he get fired?
Yeah.
It's not that drastic. But again, when you're trying to think of how would you go about life, you know, someone getting robbed, you know, an old lady getting robbed, you may step in, right? But bandits that outnumber you in the party who are attacking the town guard may not be your problem. Because that's just a way of the world. Bandits and town guards are going to fight, right? That's why there are town guards. If there were no bandits, there'd be no town guards. So maybe that's not your business to get into. But an old defenseless lady, old woman being harassed by teenagers, that's something that you could step in on, right? So now, granted, you could also make the argument, hey, that's life. You know, because again, some people play the druid of, well, if I'm in town, I don't care what happens. You know what I mean? This is the nature of city life. People being robbed is the nature of city life. Just like a squirrel that takes the egg out of a bird's nest to eat, that is not my problem. Just as the teenager taking that gold off that old woman is not my problem. So you could play it that way too. You don't have to play the good guy when you're playing neutrality, but you have to understand that, again, like what we talk about consistency. What does that mean for your character to see it that way? And will you apply that everywhere else? You know, if you get robbed, are you just, hey, that's what happens?
Well, looks like I got robbed.
Because how can you be vengeful when you get robbed, when you look at everybody getting robbed and being like, that's the way of the world, man. You know what I mean? That's that hard part about being neutral. Is you can't hold biases when it's personal. You have to accept that if you accept it from somebody else, you have to accept it for yourself.
It's true. That's very true.
Like it says, there was mine was Moon Druid. Oh, and you created one called Circle of Twilight. Oh, that sounds interesting.
Circle of Twilight's a thing.
Oh, is it? Is it already Circle of Twilight?
It is. I'm pretty sure.
All right. Well, we need to move on because we're still in OD&D. So that was the idea behind the alignments. All right. So and the whole point was being a overall guardian of nature, protecting nature, and
Stars.
it's balance with it, in everything. Spell casting was pretty limited.
Was it?
So no. So specifically, this might have actually been one of the first times that they actually had a broad spell list because they had access to both cleric and a few specific druid spells. So they gave them a handful of druidic spells, but they also had the access to the full cleric spells. So that actually is something that we won't get in other editions. So this one actually had one of the, I think they just had the fewest druid spells in this one because it was a supplemental. So I think they only gave them like 5 or 6. I couldn't get my hands on
right.
So I don't remember, but they didn't from what I could see online, they did not have a lot of specific druid spells, which is why they gave you all the cleric.
Okay.
But the spells basically were for things like weather control. So I think I don't know if you got thing like gust of wind yet, but I think control weather was one of the first ones you could do.
Like make it rain,
make it stop raining, clear the sky, make it cloudy.
Interesting.
I think that was one of the first ones you could do.
Nothing like conjuring a storm though.
I don't know if Conjure Storm was there yet. Again, I didn't have that early on, but I'm trying to think of like what you would have gotten that early on. Probably not a lot. But you did have abilities to control weather. There was animal summoning that people have talked about. And then eventually they did add as early on, and this is where we see this later. They had it this early that you were able to actually transform into elemental forms.
Okay, like
they had it as early as that the druid would eventually embody elementals.
Interesting, like flame elementals and stuff like that. There's definitely subclasses in 5th edition that let you do that. Interesting. Okay.
And then so the hierarchy. So the way that basically worked early on, and we'll go through this very specifically much later. This will be the one of the last topics that we cover is the full-on hierarchy because that's its own topic, but I want to talk about the druid first. But the hierarchy was kind of baked in early on as both part of the lore and as a restriction to the build. So this was made specifically because of the mythos, like the real world mythos around druids and similar creatures like shaman and other like fae inspirations for creatures who were basically leaders, medicine men, purveyors of knowledge, teachers in certain tribes, right? Because you think about where druids and shaman they were usually prestigious members, but there were very few. There was always like one, right? So that's where they pulled these ideas from. So this hierarchy, they wanted to build right in based off of that, right? This wasn't like there wasn't one in every town. There wasn't 5 in every party, right? These were rare. Like to find a druid was, again, you go to these, tribes that are, what we consider these, the tribes that are indigenous to certain areas that have, no modernness to them. And they'll have that one person. And it's like until they go away, until they die, that is that shaman. That is that person. That is the one person until they're replaced. Right. But that's it. It's like, you'd have to go super far to another tribe to find another one. So it wasn't like these things were just everywhere. There was no druid college, right? There was no, druid night at the local bar.
Yeah.
So they wanted to draw on the rarity of druids within the mythos. And so they made this hierarchy that kind of fits some of the ancient legends and stories. And essentially what they did was there was a hierarchy in terms of the highest ranked druids. There was only a certain number that could exist.
Okay.
So if a player wanted to excel, it was basically a built-in plot line for that class, where if you wanted to get to a certain point, you actually had to seek out the NPC that held that position and challenge them.
Interesting.
Because there was
so there's always the maximum number in existence, and you have to go find a spot and take it. Yep. So it kind of reminds me of what do you call it? if you've ever seen One Punch Man, how they have this like hierarchy of like heroes and stuff like that. You have like S class, A class, but like in A class, there's like 1 through 100, right? So you can be like S rank 1 or S rank 100,
or like Bleach, right? There's only there's only certain ranks that you can get.
Yes,
and it's like that's it. That's like,
and so if you wanted
power
to
level.
move up, you have to surpass the person that was ahead of you, and you got to like challenge them for their position. Like, wait, so
that's exactly what they did here, right? So it could have been it could have been a variety of things. It was up to the DM whether it was a puzzle, whether it was a challenge of wits, whether it was physical combat, magical combat. But essentially, you either had to defeat them one way or the other, and they either had to relinquish or you had to take the position, either get rid of them or they had to relinquish it. But there could only be so many in existence. And again, when we go through those, we'll explain what each position, what it held, what it was purpose for, and why only so many people could hold it. I'm
curious how they felt about things like assassination or like removal of their position just to acquire something like that.
Druids specifically pretty much looked down upon it because, again, it was all about keeping the balance, and assassinating someone is not about balance if they're not doing anything wrong. Like, the idea behind a druid doing that would be not very true neutral of you. But in addition to, that level of selfishness, that level of greed outside of alignment wouldn't just be looked upon as great within the greater community, because what is the purpose of that if it didn't benefit everybody? So it is a very cultural thing where, again, how to play that character would be very interesting, but that would be cool to have like an infiltrator, have a druid that's trying to do that in the ranks.
Right.
And it would be really fascinating to add that as part of the storyline. And of course, this also came a lot from like the secretive nature of like the druid mythos and the legends of druids, and just how, not like secret society they were, but just how very like mystic and ancient their magic was, and how it was just theirs and nobody else. It was always shrouded in mystery of what they could do. So that's where this was also built upon, is, they wanted this to not just be a, oh, here, you can also be it. You could be it. Anybody could be it. They really wanted it to have this effect of you earned it. You went through the trials and you're like the only one around. And if you want to escalate, you have to go adventure for it. Go find one, prove yourself, and be granted the option to step up. So I kind of liked it. It's a lot. It's a lot to ask for. It wouldn't work in 5th edition to do that for a whole subclass to make this like plot point. But early on, oh, this is like actually baking in plot points. I think that this should have been more utilized in earlier editions. I would have loved to see this more often, where like somehow each thing you choose would
take you to a certain place.
Plot point.
Interesting. Very interesting.
A couple of the standout special features that they got this early on as well. They eventually were granted immunity to poison after they leveled up so far.
Okay, cool.
And they were able to understand the language of animals as they developed as well. So they basically got to speak with animals naturally. And of course, at later higher levels, they would eventually gain the ability to shapeshift.
Okay.
So that wasn't an early level thing. That was a much later level thing early on.
Right. And to be honest, personally, I kind of like that. It makes you appreciate it a lot more. Like, I'd be down if there was like a spell that did it for you in the earlier levels, but it didn't become a class feature until later on. Didn't become something that's a part of you until later on. Just like you have to use the spell at first to speak with, plants and animals and stuff like that. But
well, and it really shows the focus difference, right? Because we make mention about it all the time, but these first editions, basically up until 3rd edition, like OD&D 1st and 2nd, were so much more focused on the narrative. They were more focused on the role play, the player, the DM, telling the story, pushing this great world, pushing this grand story along, and living into it, right? Not living up to it, but like living into it. Whereas once you get to 3.5, and then now in 5th edition, it's definitely been more combat based, more mechanic based, more not so much video gamey, but much more, let's let you feel as powerful as you can. You don't need to live to be the hero. Let's make you a hero, right? And I don't want to say it was so much that you used to have to earn it and now you just get it handed to you. It's not that simplistic, but it was more accessible to become a hero, right?
Right.
You didn't have to craft a narrative. You kind of just got to be one. You know, level 3, I choose this, I get it, right? There wasn't as much requirement for, well, explain how you got it, right? Like nowadays, people can just show up to a gaming session and say, I'm this, and this, and you're just like, but they don't live anywhere near those, and they would not have had that technology. And how did that
it's less relevant that like how I got it.
Yeah, like history, and that's why I totally get it, right? This kind of stuff wouldn't work to do these like plot hooks. But
it's unfortunate that that's the case, but
it's a difference of focus, right? And this is why I prefer the older editions. But this is one of those things that DMs nowadays can lean into. Learning about these ways that we used to approach the story can help DMs now use these, you know, character builds to craft a more detailed lore of their own world, right? Explain why this tiefling half giant has a warforged parents, you know what I mean? Like
right.
Give me any crazy build that doesn't make sense. And it's like, that's for a DM's opportunity to actually craft a story about how did you do that? Because if you can say that everywhere you go, all races, every town you go in, there's just thousands of races, then it makes sense, right? But you have all these people crafting these crazy things with backstories, races, classes, subclasses, features, and it's like, but does any of that make sense? Like, how would you have done that? And I prefer that that's why we like that method of character creation from the bottom up, is learning how and why would I have gotten there instead of just saying, well, I have it. But again, that's what I love about doing this stuff is we can definitely see these choices were made specifically for the type of gameplay that was expected.
Right.
But now that is it. That was OD&D. So that was the very, very first peak at a Druid.
Okay.
Now we move into first edition where they made it an actual core mechanic. But again, it wasn't we don't have prestige classes yet, but it wasn't considered a main class. But it was available in the player's handbook. So it was still considered a core, but it wasn't a main class view. The Bard wasn't a main class,
right?
But it was in the core rule book. And again, we maintain the aspect that this is still a Druid subclass, or under the Druid, a Cleric subclass, or under the Cleric umbrella. And we've expanded the spells a little bit more to be more in line with nature.
Okay.
And we still have now a slightly more limited access to Cleric spells.
Okay.
But we are now getting resistances to charm effects. As we level up, we'll get resistances to charm effects. Shape-shifting has been refined a little bit.
Okay. Is it still like a later level thing?
It's still a later level.
Okay.
And of course, we still have the restrictment to the neutral alignment. Basically, again, always looking at the balance and protection of nature. And of course, we still have the hierarchy as normal.
Sure.
Key features. We've dropped the access to the cleric spell list, and now we have our own druid spell list.
Okay.
Some of those spells are influenced or borrowed off of the clerics, but now we have an official spell list.
Got you.
And again, these are all focused nature, animals, elements, focused on that. We do get the ability to shapeshift, but the funny part is you're only limited to 3 forms.
Okay.
And they're very specific. So once chosen, you're locked in.
Interesting.
So you get 3 forms, 3 different types of animals, but once you choose an animal, that's the animal you get for that form.
Got you.
And we'll go over that in here in a little bit as we talk about the whole history of Wild Shape.
Okay.
The hierarchy just basically got a little bit more refined, and they made actual ranks within it, and that's what we'll go over towards the end. But is now in first edition and second edition, they actually have a whole rank structure, and that
like
rank
a followable, almost like in the military.
And that rank structure wasn't just for lore, but it also directly impacted how you leveled up, because it was directly impacting what levels you could obtain to get those
Interesting.
titles.
Okay.
So third edition and later on, as you'll see when we go through those, they became more lenient on the actual mechanical restriction, and it was more lore based.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of optional for the DM to say, hey, you're still going to make it to level 15, but you need to go find that druid now.
Right.
Like you need to prove, so it wasn't like it would stop you from leveling up and getting all the Druid stuff, unlike the previous versions. But it was still implied lore wise that if you're a Druid, there's only so many out there.
Right.
And of course, this is the time that true neutral became more specific. So because first edition redefined the 9 alignments into a more set list, now true neutral was the requirement for this particular class.
Interesting.
And true neutral was just that you are neutral on both law and order, or law and chaos, as well as good and evil.
Right.
Druids were given some base combat abilities, but I mean, basically they were even less beneficial in combat than clerics. They had less armor than clerics, and really kind of about the same prowess with weapons. So they were, again, more about spellcasting. They were definitely still focused on spellcasters. They were limited to leather armor and wooden shields. And we've talked about this before, but they get things like clubs and other natural type weapons. And of course, they still maintained the ability at later levels to get immunity to poison. They only in first edition they only leveled to level 14 though.
Only leveled to 14.
Yep.
Interesting. So that means you would have had to multi-class to get up to 20.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Or at least, if anything, you just wouldn't get anything by continuing to level. Like the class itself wouldn't level up.
Right.
You would just get
you wouldn't get class features. You'd like level up in your hit points and stuff like that.
But you'd get nothing else from it.
Interesting.
We'll go over the hierarchy and then and this is the first time that we get the mention of circles.
Okay, in first edition.
Yes, first edition is the first time we get a mention of circles, but they are not what we consider circles today. Circles were before what you had mentioned previously. So the ranks within Druidhood, what we used to call circles. So the great Druids, what was a circle?
Gotcha.
The Grand Druid had his circle. The Arch Druids, like the circles were first introduced as the hierarchies within the Druidhood. So whereas beforehand they said there's a hierarchy, there's a couple numbers, when they said here's a list, here's the ranks, and here's how you go through them, that's when they started using the terms of like the circle of druids, as in like the circle of initiates, the circle of higher druids, the grand druids, the arch druids. Those are what we're talking about as like the circle of hierarchy.
Got you.
So that's where it all began.
Okay.
And what the interesting part is you had arch druids, great druids, grand druids, were some of the different levels. But in first edition, only one druid per rank. So arch, great, and grand.
No, is this regional or is this
in setting? So in first edition setting lore, you as a DM, you were limited to one druid holding the arch druid, great druid, and grand druid position for NPC purposes.
Wild.
So again, fully built in that if you wanted those, you'd actually have to go challenge.
You got to go do something about it.
But yes, that was a very, again, you'll see why they dropped it. I mean, obviously, I can understand why they would drop it in later editions. And it definitely doesn't sound like D&D as we know it now. It sounds very restrictive.
Yeah.
But that was the lore because, again, this was based off of mythos and legend.
Right.
You know, you think about someone like Merlin, right? That would be like your grand druid. Because I definitely always believe that Merlin is much more of a druid than a wizard.
Interesting.
That actually should be a whole episode right there.
That should be a whole episode. What is
Merlin? But Merlin, to me, if you actually look at the story of Merlin, both his original story and then any adaptation, Merlin isn't really a wizard. He is a very knowledgeable, usually a professor type or an advisor, right? But his magic is not spells like we know them. His magic is much more of the sorcerer type. He just does magic, right? He's creating magic at some times in some lores. He's writing the spells. So if Merlin already has that magic, he's usually in his most earliest lore, he's usually in the forest. He usually lives amongst like the forest people. He's usually dressed as you would imagine a shaman being dressed. He's very in tune with nature. He has animal companions. Like 100%, Merlin's a druid, especially if you consider how D&D like talks about druid, and then if you apply it to Merlin, it totally makes sense.
Interesting. So we should, I want to see that episode.
We should talk about that someday.
I definitely want to see that episode.
Let me write that in Discord stream ideas. Merlin is a druid is what I'm going to call it. Or is Merlin a druid? Maybe we'll depends on what I find out. When I do some more research,
sure.
I'll figure out what to title it. But yeah, so druid circles were the various hierarchies within that. We still didn't get wild shape, so wild shape still did not officially exist, but we did have shape changing. So here's how it worked.
And this is the later level.
This is first edition, yes. So in first edition, you began to be able to shape change at level 7.
Okay.
And you were able to transform into one chosen type of reptile, bird, and mammal. So what would happen is at 7th level, you would choose one bird,
okay,
one reptile, and one mammal.
Okay.
And that's it. Those are your 3 shape changes.
So your reptile could theoretically be a land reptile or a water reptile, and your mammal could theoretically be a now, okay, what category would you say a fish is? Is it none of those?
I don't technically think you could be a fish because it's not a mammal. So
okay.
You would have to be a mammal.
Interesting.
And then most mammals, technically even water mammals, can't breathe water.
Yes.
They can usually just hold their breath.
Yes.
So you still get water benefits.
Right.
But a reptile would make more sense because most reptiles are more suited for the water.
I mean, right? Alligator's a reptile, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
So yeah. But that was I to be completely honest, I kind of like this. I like that you don't get wild shape right away. I know that hurts a lot of people's feelings. I know a lot of people think that wild shape should be like one of the foundations right away. But like, I'm trying to think of, again, my interpretation of first level is you're not anything. You are just now leaving to become an adventurer, right? Like I don't prescribe to the idea that a level 1 adventurer is an established adventurer, right? I just don't like that idea because again, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't fit. Oh, I was the great general of this army, and I'm like, and so you're gonna fall to this like CR 1/4 thing. What kind of army did you lead? Right? Like it's so difficult to let people have these brilliant backstories, but then start them at level 1, and it's like that's not how D&D progresses. A level 1 character is not going to be an impressive military leader. They're not going to be an impressive hero of an entire kingdom. Right? You may be the hero of a town because you beat up some bandits. Right? I could totally understand that you want a backstory where you're the town's hero. And that's why you left to become an adventurer. Because you did something small and got people's praise. But you can't say that you killed a dragon at level 1. Because you don't even have the ability at level 1 to even look at a dragon without taking damage. Right?
Right.
Obvious exaggeration, don't take me personal about that, but you know what I mean. Like that's my thing is like, so in my interpretation, it's like level 1 is you deciding I'm not gonna stick around and be a farmer. I'm not gonna mend a shop. I'm not gonna just go travel and trade and mend a cart. I want to do something with my life. I'm meant for something. There's the calling, however it kicks off. The point is you've made a decision that you aren't normal. You're not just the average everyday Joe that's gonna sit around town, right?
Right.
So I personally think that with a druid, even though you may have started your story in the forest, the idea that you were so in tuned that you could shape change like that early doesn't sit well with me personally, right? That to me is like something that you have to work for and earn and become part of nature. Now, I could easily see a argument for something as early as level 5. Maybe like your first shape change at level 5. Your second at level 7, and then maybe your final at level 10. But I digress. This particular one early on, level 7, I think is a good sweet spot. I think level 7 isn't terrible.
I don't mind that 100%. I will say, I'll definitely say, depending upon what wild shape looked like at these levels, will help color what I feel like is an appropriate level to get them, because in fifth edition, initially it was you get a whole brand new form, and that form is in and of itself. And when that form goes down, guess what? You got your old form just waiting and ready for you. So like, that version of Wild Shape, version of whatever this version of Wild Shape looks like, might definitely temper, oh, you should definitely get this sooner, especially if you're going to give me this weaker version of Wild Shape. You know what I mean? So definitely when we get to that point, we can go over what exactly that looks like. But I definitely feel like there's merit to, again, not just getting it right away out the jump.
Yeah. And so I really do like the approach here too. I kind of like this customization of, here are 3 forms. So I already like the maximum amount of forms. I personally like that. I kind of like that it's not just polymorph, right? Because it's like, I feel like, I don't want to use the word attune because it's not that mechanic, right?
Right.
But it's an attunement to nature. It's this idea that you are personifying nature. I love this idea that these forms should represent who you are and the beast within, your animalistic spirit, not just the fact that you're, able to just turn into any animal at will because it suits you, right? There's a fine line to me of that necessity of, you can just turn into any animal just because. Like, that would be cool for 20th level, 18th level, right? An 18th level ability where it's like, hey, you now have access to just any animal within your preferred wilderness, right? If you're a forest, you get any forest animal. If you're in the desert, you get any desert animal at a higher level. I'm totally down with that. But this right here, giving you 3 different types of animals, like you already mentioned, that's really versatile. You get a flying, a swimming, and a walking one, right?
Yep.
That's basically what I hear when they say bird, reptile, mammal.
Yes.
It's pick 1 to fly, 1 to swim, 1 to walk.
Sure.
That also gives you the ability to have these limited ones. First off, it gives you some versatility, but it also lets you customize. It lets you decide, well, what am I? Do I have the strength of an eagle, or am I the stealth of an owl? Do I want to fly silent through the night and scope out things, or do I want to be a predator? Do I want to be a raptor that will go and claw my enemy's eyes out, right? Do I want to be a bear or a panther? Do I want to be a mouse or a squirrel or a hippo, right? Do I want to be an alligator? Do I want to be a frog? Do I want to be a gecko? Do I want to be something super fast or something that can hide and camouflage, right? Those are the things where it's like, when I hear this, it's not about what suits you in the moment. It's about what suits your character.
Right.
And I feel like that makes it more unique and more representative of the player and what they've done with it. To me, that's just, it hits a really good sweet spot for me of being able to say that your druid and my druid will definitely be different. Because even though we both might have birds of prey, we might have a completely different mammal. Because you just want that bear to I just want to rush up and claw the crap out of him, where I'm like, no, dude, I want to hide. Like, if I'm going mammal, like you may choose the bear for the mammal attacking. I may choose a squirrel or a mouse because I want to infiltrate. So my mammal is used for speed and agility and small cracks, and yours is used for damage, right? That makes us completely different minded. Your approach to things should be reflected by the animals you choose, and vice versa. You should choose animals based off of how you approach situations. I would be
interested, like, specifically if you had, if you chose a creature that had both versions, like, because imagine you chose a wolf, but you could, yes, it's one form, but you could be a wolf or you could be a dire wolf. You know what I mean? So like, it's the one form, or like, imagine you choose a rat. You could be a tiny little rat, or you could be like not a were rat, but like a giant rat, like one of those that is like the size of a dog or something.
Being able to level that up, like have different versions would be cool. Yeah. So in general, I really like how they did it. I think 7th level isn't
very much so,
and I really do think that having one of each is just really cool, and it lets you just kind of run with it, right? And again, what you were mentioning too, how does this look? In 1st edition, it was largely interpreted by the DM on what it meant for you.
Meaning,
like, when you chose the animal, it was kind of, there wasn't like, oh, here's a list of birds you can choose. It was, I want to be an owl, and the DM would be like, cool, so you are silent at night, or you are silent when you fly, but you can't attack very hard. Versus if you chose a falcon, he might give you a claw attack. And you might be able to
Interesting.
maybe you'll fly farther.
So they didn't have like creature stats already
Not
built
like
in
this.
for.
This was you get to choose an animal, and you and your
Interesting.
DM decided what made sense the most. And I love that, right? Again, it's that customization of you got to just be what you needed to be.
Interesting. No, I'm here for that.
Oh, you just thought of an amazing Druid class, Ekate? Awesome. You let us know when you're done with it.
Bro, I need this. Yeah, I'm telling you, Druids is one of my favorite 5th edition classes, man. I need so much more of it.
All right, and then let's end with a couple examples of some spells, because again, we always talk about like what are like they finally got their own Druid list.
Sure,
of
sure.
spells.
Yes.
And again, we always talk about like the nature focus, whatever. So here's just a couple examples of spells 1 through 5, because again, they were kind of limited. They only got up to certain spell levels. But here's just a couple examples I was able to find. Just going from 1 through 5, I found 2 examples of each, so every other one is going to go up a level. But for first level, we have Entangle and Fairy Fire with the spell list. So like I said, it's not like brand new spells. It's just
Love those spells, very
that
classics.
right? Second level, Bark, Skin, and Heat Metal.
Love. Wow, those are both. Actually, yeah, I think those are both. Yeah, I like them both very much so.
Call Lightning, Plant Growth.
Oh my gosh, I love Call Lightning. I love Call Lightning.
It's the best alternative to fire.
Right? And I don't know if it works the same. Like, I'd be very interested to see like these versions of these spells.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, that would be so crazy.
Ooh, we should poll chat or do like a thread in chat someday where it's like, give us like the like we need like a list of top 10 spells, and then we'll do a history
spell evolution.
Like, yeah, just a handful of like the most common spells.
Interesting.
So level 4, you get Animal Summoning 1 and Giant Insect.
Okay.
And
Cool.
then level 5, Animal Summoning 2, and then Wall of Fire, which is interesting that you get a fire spell.
It is very
But you
interesting.
get Wall of Fire. So that's fascinating to me that you get a fire spell.
That's why.
But it isn't quite an AoE, so it is controllable.
I mean, lightweight. It's not like an explosion like Fireball, but still.
So that was first edition. That was what first edition Druid looks like.
Okay.
All right. So second edition Druid. We get an expanded spell list. So we're gonna go. We'll get a little bit more spells. More related to plants, animals, and weather specifically. So this is where we're gonna get like Gale Force Wind, create storms. Do things like being able to like call storms and things of that sort. We are still able to shapeshift, but we do not have wild shape yet. But we are getting a little more flexibility in what shapeshifting is.
Do we still have later levels for this shapeshifting?
Yeah, we'll go over that one in here in a second. The Druid hierarchy again was modified a little bit, but we're going to go over that later. I don't want to like clog that up. But second edition was first and second edition finalized all of the hierarchies, the ranks, and leveling. Every other edition after this just basically said, yeah, what they said, but in the story.
Got you.
Don't worry about the mechanics, but in the story, yeah. So it's like, yeah, just refer to them if you want to know how to talk about it. But here's how you level up anyway.
Got you.
They did modify it a little bit in terms of the Druid's role. So beforehand, it was basically it was under the cleric, but not quite a healer. Could do a little bit of healing, but it was just more of another spellcaster.
Got you.
Now we're getting in more of a role where we have a broader spell list. So we are much more involved in being a supportive spellcaster.
Okay.
Before it was just kind of a spellcaster. Now we're definitely more focused on support spellcasting, leaning towards offensive support.
Interesting.
So we're offensive support spellcaster.
Okay.
And of course, role play wise, beforehand, you were just this Druid to be a cool representation. Like it was the ideology of the player. Now the Druid is more being implemented as a critical, no connection, no affiliation, but a critical role within parties to be an arbiter, a
very negotiator,
the bridge between the natural world and civilized world.
Sure.
So it was really the idea behind like this was going to be a good what's the word? Ambassador, basically.
Right.
So Druids were really good at just being able to bring people together because again, they're all about neutrality. So they were really good, even if they didn't have high charisma, at getting down to what the problems are, what both sides wanted to see, right? They don't care about biases. They don't care about emotions. So it's like, look, what do you want? What do you want? Okay, screw all of your emotions. This is what they want. This is what they want. do you agree or not? Right.
Got a mediator.
You didn't have to be good. You didn't have to be a bard you didn't want to win. You weren't here to win people over. You were here to get to the point. So
interesting.
So that's what they kind of intended the bard to be, or the druid to be, was this ambassador, this mediator of sorts, as a party additional, instead of having to be a bard with high charisma. Because again, fighters are going to fight. They're going to be aggressive. Mages are going to just be intellectual about it. And it may be a little bit emotionless about it. But everybody's going to play their part. Rogues are going to be selfish and always be looking for the odd way out. You kind of need that person who doesn't have a personal invested interest, who wants the balance out of it.
Right.
So they intended it to be more of that role play.
Okay.
Let's see. Weather control, plant manipulation, more animal spell summoning. We'll get into that in a second. We did get more in second edition. It was more about preparing spells. So it's like you basically had a list of spells, and then essentially every morning you chose which ones you'd have access to that day.
Okay, so kind of like it is now in 5th edition, you got your prepared spell list, but you had all of these to mess with.
It wasn't really a memorization. It was much more along the lines of like clerics, where you kind of just had them prepared in the morning. But yeah, you had a select few based on your level, but you had your whole list to choose from every single day.
Got you. Okay.
And you didn't have to have a book or anything. You just had them. Could do them. And then they were given a wider range of weapons now. So instead of just like the natural clubs and weapons, they could use things like sickles and spears. Okay. So still more of your like natural weapons, things you can make in the forest, but you got more than just like clubs and stuff like that. And definitely more focused in combat, more supportive. Like I said, definitely more about a little bit about healing, a lot about battlefield control. So I said, definitely leaning more towards the offensive support.
Got you.
But there is some healing involved in there too. So again, it's still under that cleric umbrella.
No, I feel that.
And then shapeshifting ability has been enhanced a little bit more. You have more of a wider variety of elementals, and eventually being able to turn into elemental forms. So you had a wider variety of things you can turn into of animals, and then elemental forms later. In second edition, they aligned the leveling up more closely to clerics, so they didn't have their own level progression. They're more in line with how clerics are supposed to level up.
Okay.
But they still maintained the hierarchy of lore. So again, you still had limitations, unlike other classes, to actually seek out
in-game. Okay.
And we will talk. Oh, and in second edition, the circles expanded. So before, circles were first introduced as the hierarchies, right? The groups of hierarchies within the Druid society.
Right.
Now in second edition, circles were expanded to the aspects of more like factions. So now you had like aspects of nature, right? So you had druids of like Arctic druids, forest druids, desert druids. These became your circles. So instead of it being the arch druid and the great druid were their own circle, and the initiates were their own circle, now it's those ones over there in the Arctic region, those the Arctic druids, that's the circle of the Arctic. Then you have the circle of the desert druids, the circle of the forest druids.
That kind of starts turning the circles closer to what subclasses are.
Exactly.
It's rather than just being
kind of like you are a sorcerer, status. But you are a ice sorcerer now. You have more focus on ice sorcery. It's basically saying that you're a druid, but based on your region, what did your druid powers acquiesce to, or not acquiesce to? What did they accumulate to?
Right.
But I do like that we're seeing the evolution, right? They first wanted it to be more about like the inner workings of druid hierarchy, and now it's more about the social structure of where and what their intentions are. So I do like that they are trying to expand upon that. They were also called orders as well.
Orders, circles.
Yeah,
interesting.
They were kind of like toying with how.
What else? What else is called order? I mean, I know there's like Order of the Phoenix for Harry Potter and stuff.
Usually, like paladins had orders. Usually like gods would have like Order of Justice or something like that.
Got you.
So
okay, I can see that direction.
Any kind of group that had a I guess orders were more of like an order was typically a group that had a goal and I don't want to say a requirement, but like a goal, not just like goal like we all want this to happen, but like that was your job. right? Like you guys are not just wanting that to happen. You are required, if you're in this order, to make it happen. That's always, that's always the difference of when I use the word order, it's not just a group of people who want the same thing. It's a group of people who, if you're in that group, you are doing it to get there. Like you are making things happen for that goal. You're not just hoping that it happens one day.
Got you.
Let's see. So shapeshifting ability was expanded a little bit in second edition to gain more flexibility as they leveled up. They got more frequency and a variety of transformations than in first edition. So they were just given more opportunities. I think first edition was once per long rest. It was like basically once a day. And in second edition, you started to level up. You got more than once a day. Like you could actually start to get it at higher levels. So you weren't just limited that much.
Okay.
Which I do think was really good for roleplay purposes as well as combat. Being able to kind of like, have multiple opportunities was, I think, really a good move. Okay, so we still had it locked into 7th level in second edition, so you still didn't get access to shape changing until 7th level. But at 7th level, you got the ability to shape change into still a reptile, bird, or mammal, but you continue to get increased frequency. So level 7 to 11, you could transform into a small or medium-sized animal. Which includes a reptile, bird, or mammal. So small, or medium, reptile, bird, or animal. Oh, did we do it? We did it, ladies and gentlemen. That is it. Congratulations. The community challenge is done on the final day. So yes, I will post this weekend. We will have a new extra stream sometime next month. I will post in the Discord for ideas because we will find out who had the highest. That's
right, amount. The highest contributor.
I will look at who had the highest contributor. I think I know who it was.
I have an idea.
And then we will reach out to them for a topic idea. And if they don't have a specific one, we will have them vote once we have a list. So either we will ask them, we will ask the highest bidder if they have an idea, and if they don't, I will come up with a 2 or 3
for a list,
and then they will vote for it.
Okay.
So congratulations,
look
everybody.
At that. I like it. I like it.
That is not scheduled. And it will probably be on a weekend. It'll most likely be on a weekend.
Sure.
We'll also work with that because we want to make sure the highest contributor can also be
They're going to be there.
Yeah. So thank you all for that. That's been fantastic.
Much appreciated.
I don't think I'm going to lower the price this time.
No, I like that. I mean, we made it work. We made it work.
Good. I don't know. You guys let me know if you felt that was too expensive.
I mean, we can look at the contribution spread to see if it the
more people, the more followers we get, the more people that are in stream, the easier it is. That was a lot of dumping that a lot of y'all did. I mean, 4,000 points.
I know, right?
I don't know. I don't even know how often you guys gain points, but I mean,
yeah.
I know you gain a lot as you watch, and there's like streaks. It's not just for every minute, but like if you're there for it's like every 10 minutes, but then if you're there for an hour, you get a bonus. And then if you're there for 2 hours, you get a bigger bonus.
Oh, really?
So it's like a thing that racks up.
Interesting. That's cool. I didn't realize that.
I don't pay attention too much, but I think there is a way to get more because I don't know how y'all are having like 5,000 points.
Shoot.
You guys I
mean, I have 10K, but that's just because I'm here every stream and I don't use any of the points. So
true.
And I think because I'm a mod, I get
you
get more
extra. All right. Anyways. Well, awesome. Yes. Extra stream next month. Thank you all. Okay. So 7 to 11, you were able to transform into a small or medium-sized bird, reptile, mammal. You could use this ability 3 times a day starting out. So at 7th level, 3 times a day.
Okay.
So essentially 1 each.
Sure.
Which it wasn't the requirement, but was the idea.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You basically
theoretically
have 1 each. And then the duration. Each transformation could last for 2d6 hours, providing significant flexibility in terms of duration. So beforehand, I think it was only like an hour each. I think you were limited to like an hour each in first edition.
Interesting.
And like once per day, or it was like once per day for each form, or just once per day in general. This one, 3 times per day, smaller, medium, and 2d6 hours.
Interesting. Now, the question is, if you reverted back early, do the rest of those hours go away?
It's per transformation. So what you let's say I use my first of 3 to transform into bird, and I roll 2d6 and I roll 6 hours. I get 6 hours in bird form. The moment I transform out, I'm done.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Then once I transform again, 2d6.
Got you. Okay.
All right, and then starting at 12th level to 16th level, you were able to you gain the ability to transform into large animals.
Oh, okay.
So you go straight to 12th level.
Wow.
Large animals.
Wow, I like it. I like it.
Frequency and duration of the transformations remain the same, so still 3 times a day, 2d6 hours. But the new forms would offer greater physical capabilities because you were transforming into large versions, and often included predatory animals. So you basically these were the battle upgrades, right?
Got you. So it's way more useful in combat and things of that nature.
So it seemed like the first one, the 7 through 11, was roleplay based, like out of combat and maybe a little bit of combat focused. This is definitely now we're leaning into being offensive supportive.
Okay.
And then 17th level and higher. Started at 17th level, you were able to transform into a 16 hit die elemental, air, earth, fire, or water once per week.
Wild.
This transformation was particularly powerful, obviously, because it gave them those abilities of that elemental, such as moving, their movement speed, their fly speed, their swim speed, and any elemental traits like resistances or immunities. And this was limited to once per week, obviously for just how powerful it was, but you were also limited to 1 hour per level.
Interesting.
So you automatically have 17 hours.
God bless. That's wild.
So the idea was
That's
this
wild.
is great for if you're traveling. Like I think a big one was like you turn into an air elemental and you can transport your people, or you're on a boat, turn into an air elemental.
Oh, could you
basically travel the boat, or blow on the boat?
Yeah.
So the idea was is 17 hours. You basically could spend most of the day as an elemental and do what you needed. Let's say you have an alchemist in your group, and you guys were building a bunch of stuff and it's going to take you a bunch of hours. You could tend to the fire, right? You just have the stuff boil. Maybe you could help make potions. So the idea behind the elemental for so long, this wasn't about combat, right? Remember, this is early edition. So this was much more about the creativity of the story. You're not going to be in battle for 17 hours, but being an elemental with that kind of ability for that long, you could travel through elemental planes of existence. You could help, your buddies travel or fly. You could move, again, you can move a boat that doesn't have a sail, turn to a water elemental and push.
Would be cool. That would be very cool.
A lot of versatility with that. So that's definitely, I think we're getting into the right direction of Wild Shape. I love these early editions of Wild Shape. I think these are pretty much spot on of where you think Wild Shape should do. Like that right there is a good snapshot for me. I like that Wild Shape a little bit more than what we see now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It feels it feels a little too accessible too quick right now.
Right.
With 5th edition Wild Shape, I kind of like this idea that I got to work at it. I gotta earn some more of it.
I'm feeling that there is a happy medium that we can like use to like combine to what like an ideal version of like what all this stuff should look like. And I feel like it's here somewhere. Of course it is.
All right, and then 2nd edition, of course, we got an expanded Druid spell list. So again, integrating from other ones, but a couple examples starting from 1st level and going forward. We start out with Cure Light Wounds and Entangle. So
sure.
Good classics. We get Bark Skin and then Charm Person or Animal.
Okay.
Some classics, good ones.
Very nice.
Again, Call Lightning, but now we get Summon Insects.
Cool beans.
At 4th level, we're getting Animal Summoning 1 and Hold Plant, which is very interesting. I didn't know Hold Plant was actually a spell.
Interesting. I mean, I haven't heard of it, which means it's probably an older spell.
It's 2nd edition spell. So
yeah.
That's a unique one. I haven't even heard of it, so I'm kind of confused on that one. And then we have Animal Growth. I didn't know there was I know Plant Growth, but Animal Growth. That sounds interesting.
Interesting.
That's another spell I have no idea about.
I wonder if you could use it on yourself in Wild Shape.
Oh.
Now,
and then there's Insect Plague.
Insect Plague. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Up until this point, has there been any restrictions? And maybe we'll find out about this when we get into the Wild Shape section. Has there been any restrictions when it comes to casting spells while in your Wild Shape?
Oh, that's a good question. Hang on a second. I wanted to look at what Animal Growth was. Hello? Okay. So animal growth. When this spell is released, it was a priest spell originally. When the spell is released, the caster causes up to 8 animals within a 20-foot square area to grow to twice their normal size. The effect of this growth are double hit die, they double hit points, and they double damage in combat.
Goodness gracious.
So you use this with the summon, like the insects, and then you just make them all.
Golly.
Yeah. So you tie this with a bunch of insects.
Is that concentration? Did they have concentration back then?
They had concentration spells.
Yeah.
This is not concentration.
Goodness gracious.
It's a level 5 spell.
That is a hefty spell, but still.
Let me see. What is going on with... You're getting an error from Google. This is crazy.
Really? Is it from any of our documents, or is this just like you Googling stuff?
Just Google in general. Just
That's wild.
No, so you were not able to cast spells or use weapons while in wild shape.
Okay.
And I believe that's carried over in each edition.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I 100% makes sense, but you could make the argument about certain animals like monkeys, apes.
Yes.
You could make the argument
And they're
rudimentary use tools.
There's terminology, and I think 5th edition, that anything that they would not traditionally be able to do. So like if you have an opposable thumb, you can do opposable thumb things, but if you don't, like a wolf, you're not going to be able to hold or throw a spear.
And I think that's basically been the general's consensus, because again, earlier editions were all about what makes sense. An alligator's not going to wield, a bow staff.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense, right?
Although I have heard this isn't technically 5th edition. I think this is kind of like a variation or whatever, but there was an edit to Druids where in wild shape you could speak Druidic still. Specifically Druidic, and you could use that as the verbal components for any spell that had a range of either touch or self. So it's not like you can just cast anything. It's not like you're casting Fireball, but you can cast spells on yourself.
That's
and you can do like cure wounds, touching somebody.
I can understand. Like, if someone wanted to make an argument that there is a specific spell, again, doesn't have but let's say it's a verbal only spell. I don't know if there are any verbal only component spells, but let's say you have a verbal only component spell, and you can convince me that you turn into a bird that legitimately can speak, like a parrot. And therefore could say the component. Okay. If you could convince me that all you needed was a material, and as long as you're holding the material, you can do the spell, right? And it's an intense spell. Okay. So as long as you turn into a hippo and I pick up that rock, that's the material, the spell goes off, right? I could see certain things happening, right? You have to have an opposable thumb to do a, somatical spell. But the idea that if there's any multitudes of it, that's what breaks it down, right? If you have to speak and you're in any other form that can't speak, that again, it's more of a logic approach.
Right.
That alligator doesn't have vocal cords. It doesn't matter that you're magical. It doesn't have vocal cords. You turned into it. Like, a lot of people say, but I'm magical. I can blah, blah, blah. And I can still speak. And it's like, but that's the OP-ness. Otherwise, guess what? Every enemy you ever fight is going to be invisible because they're the flea on your shoulder casting fireball into your ear. But you could do, you know what I mean? Like, there's a point at which it just doesn't make sense that otherwise every druid would never be in human form ever again. You know what I mean? Like, if you essentially could do everything in druid form, why would druids ever be in human form?
Right.
So, But that's again.
I do like the fact that
I like overthinking stuff
at the very least, because you keep your mental stats, you're allowed to continue concentrating on spells that you've cast prior to.
I'm totally okay with the fact that you are in control of the new body, but it is a full body. It is the body, but it's still your mind. I'm totally okay with that. It's kind of like the same thing of like, I'm okay with the absorption of like all your stuff, like
right.
pocket dimensioning it. I'm okay with that. Makes more sense than your stuff melds to you.
Right.
If it's not magical, your stuff should just pocket dimension. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah.
I also don't like the idea that your stuff just falls, because then no one would ever wild shape. Like,
very much so.
Like, it would make sense mythologically. That's a word.
Yeah.
It would make sense. A druid just has a staff and some robes, and he needs to get away or intimidate you. He's just gonna shapeshift right then and there. Toss the robes. He's naked. He can get a staff back later. But in a D&D campaign, you are never just carrying robes and a staff.
Yes.
There's no way any right-minded D&D player would be like, well, there's 15 rations, 9,000 gold, just like sitting there off their character sheet, like, here's all the things that I will never pick back up in this swamp that's immediately gonna, start sinking. Like, I don't like that restriction, because as much as I like it for the lore purpose, it doesn't make any sense gameplay wise. Yeah. It doesn't benefit anybody to lose your stuff to wild shape.
Yeah. And you can make it make sense the other way around too, and have it function properly for gameplay. So,
though I would rule it that low level polymorph spells should drop all your items, and higher versions should pocket dimension them. I think that is a limitation that is sorely missed in the current spell set, because the first version, the earliest lowest level version of polymorph, shouldn't be able to be cast upon you while you're while you're wearing stuff, right? Like, if I just want to make you into a different race, I should have to do it to you and then you put stuff on, right? Like, if I turn you into a gnome, your clothes wouldn't go with you, so all your stuff should then be like way too big. So I should turn you into the gnome, and then you have to get dressed for stuff to fit you. Like, in my opinion, the lowest level shouldn't do any, it should absolutely not affect anything.
Lowest level polymorph is 4th level.
Okay. Because it does affect all your stuff, right? Doesn't it?
I believe so. Transforms a creature that you can see within range. Unwilling creatures have to make a saving throw. Transform less. Replaced. Target assumes the points, and it doesn't actually. The target's gear melds into the new form.
Yeah. And to me,
yes.
I don't think the lowest version of that spell, especially because there's 2 versions of it.
So
I think the higher version, because again, it takes away, it does 2 things. It, one, takes away a benefit to do it on yourself,
right?
Or at least without proper planning. But it also gives you a huge bonus when you do it to somebody, because it makes them drop all their shit.
That's actually what I was going to ask.
And then when they turn back, all their shit's still on the ground. That could make it, again, sucks for you. Like, makes you take way more extra steps for you to benefit. Like, you wouldn't be able to magically turn yourself into someone 10 times taller or into a different creature, because again, you lose all your stuff. But there's a benefit there. I'm just saying there's a benefit to this idea.
Theoretically, with this working this way, imagine there's somebody like backstage about to go out on stage and like address like a whole bunch of people, like maybe a king, a knight, a prince, whomever, whatever. Right? He's back there, he's meditating, he's got his eyes closed, and imagine like somebody comes up and stealthily casts polymorph on him, turns him into something small, and he just starts walking out after they call his name, and then you release concentration and he's back up to his humanoid size, just with absolutely nothing. That's theoretically how.
Or I would think about it. Think about this, right? Think about like they're gonna go up there, they're looking all good, they're about to address their people, but as they're walking to the stage, you silently cast polymorph just to make them a fat version of themselves. So as they walk up to the podium, their clothes
just all get real tight.
Their buttons are just starting to pop, and they're just like, excuse me, like all of their clothes are just suddenly super tight on them.
Goodness gracious.
Oh, imagine doing that to like a knight in the middle of combat, where suddenly he's just like, I'm gonna, like, he just can't move in his armor because he's too fat. He's literally locked in his armor because he can't move.
So then that would beg the question is,
can you crush someone?
Yeah, like how, imagine the idea of like you're in a very small tight area. Like, does the magic push everything else out, or do you get crushed or like what is
same kind of concept of if you're in a cage and someone casts enlarge on you, do you get Swiss cheese?
And there are certain spells
you get cheese grated,
right?
Cage because enlarge specifically states you can't go bigger than your container.
So very true.
I would assume that polymorph, being on that same level, would do the same. You can't polymorph someone to death.
Exactly.
But their shit, I think, it's still free game. Because again, and I only say this because polymorph has a higher level, because it has a higher version. Right. Same thing with invisibility, right? I think invisibility is a little bit too powerful. What can it take? Like the lower version is only you, the higher version's multiple people. Right.
Well, the higher version, you can cast spells and stay invisible. The lower version, the second you do anything, and it doesn't dampen your sound at all.
And I like that, right? I totally get all of that. But polymorph is just kind of powerful as is.
I mean, it is.
So I think throwing that out could be kind of fun.
Okay.
But okay, so we're already through second edition. We're gonna jump into third because there was a couple changes. I need to go use the restroom and grab some more water. So
do it.
Be right back, and we will.
Hydration.
Time, actually,
we're doing all right. We at 9:30.
Yeah, we're 2 hours in.
We're
making good time. I'll be right back, y'all. Keep entertained.
I don't know. I'm very excited. I like the direction that we've been going here, like the different aspects of what Druid brings to the table, how they are looking at wild shape differently. I definitely get why 5th edition made it like a staple, because it's like that's what you do. It's like this is the Druid's thing. Like this is how you operate. This is where all of which you feel like your primary piece of being a Druid is. But I kind of feel like that is a part of the problem. I almost think that while Druids do have a lot to offer, like they are full casters, and I think there are other ways to make Druids feel special other than wild shape. I lightweight think that wild shape should have been limited to the moon Druids. Like because wild shape is like what they do, right? Like I think like maybe there was like a subclass of Druid that does animal wild shape, and there's a different subclass of Druid that does plant wild shape, or whatever the case may be. But like I kind of feel like some of those things should be limited, or maybe kind of like and that's if that's what the whole class is. So if you're gonna start off from like level 1 with being able to wild shape, I think that it should have been moon Druid only. Like all the other Druids, yes, you can get it in later levels, and it can be a class feature that you can choose and whatnot. But I definitely think that I like the way that this is going, and that this is starting to feel at least a little bit.
Watching the evolution.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off what you were just saying too, one thing that I would like to have seen instead of kind of like what you were saying, I don't know if limiting what Druids can wild shape, because it is kind of the cornerstone of Druid itself, because otherwise if you take away that, they really are just a nature spellcaster. But what we saw here in like terms of how the circles have been developed, right? Why wasn't it lore wise, like creativity wise, the player should be doing this and is expected to, but they should have just limited it to the type of Druid you are. If you're an Arctic Druid, if you came from the Arctic, if you came from the forest, if you came from like the foothills, if you came from the mountains, you should be locked into animals that reside there. Like in the monster manual, go in there and go, where are these animals found? And if they're found in your zone, you can turn into it. But if they're not, and you can't, right? Like if you're from the Arctic, if you have a background with, an Arctic, be polar bear. You don't get a grizzly bear, you get a polar bear, right? You could choose a whale, but you can't choose a dolphin.
I even kind of like expanding the list to not just so as right now, at least in 5th edition, it's only beasts, beast type creatures.
I heard you say something about plant, like being able to have like a plant shift or something,
like being able to turn into plants, or even other types of creatures. Like technically a displacer beast is not a beast, it's like an aberration or something like that. But like if a displacer beast happened to reside in your jungle, I think that should be something you could wild shape into, right? Yeah. Like, yes, they have cool and special abilities, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they wanted to limit that, is because there are certain creatures
at higher levels you could justify it. If you're gonna be able to wild shape early, might as well say that at higher levels you have access to if I can turn into a goddamn elemental, why can't I be an aberration?
Hell yes. Tell me that a fire elemental can't do some like wall of fire type stuff.
Yeah, look, if I can turn into an elemental, an air elemental, and a lightning elemental, then I should be able to turn into a displaced beast.
Fair.
Yeah,
very fair.
All right, well, we're making good time. We're not quite halfway through, but we're gonna blaze through this. So, 3rd edition, we had some new stuff coming down. So now officially we have wild shape. So this is officially where we get the announcement of the term wild shape instead of just shape shifting.
Got you. Is that because shape shifting covered a lot of other things other than just a wild shape?
I think, yeah, now wild shape became the Druid's version, because shape shifting was just something that could be done. There were shape shifters, there were other things, but it was to differentiate what Polymorph was doing with other like shape shifting creatures. This was the Druid's cornerstone.
Because Polymorph actually shifts your mind, not just your body. Like
I don't remember if you have to change your mind or not.
Interesting. I'll look into that.
Because the idea is if you polymorph yourself, you'd be able to polymorph back. You're not like, you can't polymorph yourself down.
See, that's I've heard arguments on both sides. Like I've heard people talking about like, oh, I have the mind of a fly now. You know what I mean?
I don't think that's true. I will have to look into that, but I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
Let's see. So more wider range of animals, and of course, even more elementals that you can transform into at higher levels, because of course 3rd edition just kept on expanding a bunch of stuff.
Of course.
Now you get an animal companion. You were able to gain the loyal companion as you grew in power. So at a certain level, you were able to get basically familiar. Which I mean, why not?
I love that.
You need that. Here's something that I thought was really awesome. They came up with this new idea, and I don't think they have it in 5th edition anymore, called spontaneous summoning.
Interesting.
Druids could spontaneously convert a prepared spell into a summoning spell to call forth an animal. Dope, right?
You can turn a spell slot into a summoned creature?
Basically, yeah, you could take any of your prepared spells and say, I don't need that one. Boom, buddy on the battlefield.
That's wild.
It's fucking cool, dude. I'm so mad that they got rid of it. It's so cool.
I like that.
Of course, we had to keep the neutral alignment, but it was a little bit relaxed. So instead of it being true neutral, as every other one, you just had to be neutral.
Of some sort.
Neutral good, lawful neutral,
chaotic just neutral.
Just neutral, man. You just had to be.
You just got to be able to vibe, bro.
Right? You just had to believe in a balance and maintain a balance.
Fair.
So even if you were evil, even if you were, again, lawful good means lawful, or lawful neutral. It means lawful meant you believe in the structure, that it has a reason and it has a purpose. That doesn't necessarily mean you believe in following it. Lawful good means you believe in it and you want to make it happen. Lawful evil means you believe in it because it suits your needs. You believe in it because you want everyone else to follow the rules while you don't have to, right? Like,
interesting.
Like gamblers. They want the rules. They want you to follow the rules so you don't notice when they cheat. They want you to follow the rules so you don't notice that the house has advantage, right? That's lawful evil. Lawful good is someone who says, well, that's unfair. You shouldn't have the advantage, right? Lawful evil is the one who owns the casino. Lawful evil is the one who owns the casino. Lawful good's the one who wants it to be shut down. Lawful neutral is the bank that rolls it.
Of course.
They're like, hey man, you have a legal business, but you legally set it up to be in your favor, and people are voluntarily giving you money.
Well, good for you.
Hey man. That's all. That's how life works. So that's like, I like that idea that you could be a druid who, again, it kind of opens up the idea that you don't have to
play one specific type of
emotions and not have bias, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a chance to pick sides, but still understand that it's not about obliterating opponents. It's not about removing choice. It's about making sure that the best choice is chosen, but that choice always remains. You know what I mean? Like, you may want to stop rebels from overthrowing a town, but you don't want to stop rebels from existing. Rebels are a natural good thing to have. They question authority. They make authority be better, right? They hold things accountable.
I mean,
but you don't want them to.
just with Star Wars, their rebels were great. We love their rebels.
Yeah, but that's the idea of that. Like, you could be on the side of the rebels or against them, but you still need to understand that neither should be the only one left.
Right.
And I like that about this druid. Instead of just being the one that says, I'm going to stay out of it, this druid in 3rd edition now allow you to join in. You just can't be too extreme.
Right.
And that's again, this is where it starts being that whole thing of true neutral was difficult to play, because a lot of times you'd have to just bow out of making choices. Now you just have to, be more strategic about it. But I do like that they changed that. The Animal Companion ends up getting some customizable abilities and strengths as you level up. Continue to advance the spell casting abilities. So, of course, the Druid spell list got more and more spells, of course. Still, preparing them daily off of your whole list. So
right.
You basically have a huge list. Prepare them daily. You have this spontaneous conversion into a summoning spell. Wild Shape was expanded even more, giving you more things to do with it, more variety of animals. 3rd edition included magical beasts and elementals as part of your Wild Shape.
Okay.
Okay, so and the Animal Companion was actually gained at level 1. So at level 1, you were able to get your companion, which didn't just act as a pet, obviously, but it basically leveled along with you. So you got it at level 1 and it leveled with you.
That's kind of cool. Very similar to the Rangers Animal Companion that they eventually get in one of their iterations.
Exactly. So that's what's really nice about this, is it did allow you to get that companion to level up with you, get stronger with you. It actually got to gain abilities as well. Finally, we now have a druid that levels all the way through level 20.
Okay,
so
awesome.
We'll go all the way through, and they gain basically stuff the whole way. And even the Wild Shape continues to get better as it levels up.
Cool.
Here. Oh, and this was the first time basically that you were really introduced to the ability to multi-class with Druid. Like 3rd edition really had actually good mechanics for multi-classing with Druid.
Okay.
Because before it was kind of that prestigious class, it was kind of a more, focused ideology. Right. But they had features and aspects to make this more approachable for multi-class and to make it more versatile.
Okay.
And it was also designed to help increase their spell casting. Like, that was kind of a big cornerstone, is to give them more spells to do.
Got you.
Let's see. Wild Shape. So, Wild Shape was now gained at 5th level, not 7th.
Okay.
And you were able to turn into any small or medium animal, with the sizes and types of animals expanding as you go up. So now you weren't limited to 3 types. You weren't limited to air, reptile, mammal. You were limited to basically just any small, medium animal.
Okay.
So you didn't have before, you had to choose one of each, and that's what you were locked into. Now it's just
whatever you want
as you choose. You could be used more frequently. Initially, you start out at once per day at level 5, and then you'll be able to increase that more times per day as you level up, as well as the size and duration that it lasts, of course. By 7th level, you were able to transform into large animals. So that's way more of an improvement than the previous editions.
Okay.
And then again, eventually, at later levels, we'll go through this in a second, but you get tiny and huge.
Interesting. I do like the fact that tiny is also later.
You also get plants and elementals as well.
Very nice. At just later levels, or at the same time?
At later levels, you'll get plants.
Okay.
Oh, and here's the cool part. So 3.5 specifically altered Wild Shape to make it a supernatural ability. The key features of this is it wasn't subject to spell resistances, and it didn't provoke opportunity attacks. So it officially became just like an innate thing.
Got you.
Happened,
yeah, because a lot of the
action.
times when you attacked somebody, if you had two people engaged with you and like you attacked this person, that person got an attack of opportunity because you didn't attack them. You know what I mean? Because your attention was focused away from them. So there used to be and I think that might be what it's talking about. It's like if you do something while you're adjacent to somebody, you're not provoking an attack of opportunity. Because I'm assuming if they move away from that target, they still get an attack of opportunity. But the wild shape itself doesn't provoke it.
Yeah. Which is, kind of, very weird like mechanics that they used to have. But yeah, I think like the spell resistance too was basically like if you were in an anti-magic shield or something, you'd still be able to wild shape.
Got you.
Because it was a supernatural ability. It wasn't a spell. So things like that didn't cost you anything. And then, okay, so here's a little bit more about what we got with wild shape. So at level 5, small, medium animals. That was where we were locked in. And specifically animals, which is kind of nice. Not just beasts. So again, a little bit more.
So how would you see that difference as a DM?
I would see it as you'd probably have more access to different creatures depending on what they were categorized as, but I also see it as a holdover for allowing the player and DM to in the moment work something out. Like there may not be a sparrow in D&D,
right,
or an owl in D&D, but I want an owl because it's quiet.
Yes.
Right? Like we know owls are basically silent when they fly, whereas every other animal is. So if there's a creature that we're fighting against that has super hearing, telling my DM I want an owl
is different than just saying I want to be a bird.
Exactly.
Right.
I find that as I want to be an owl because I won't be heard while I fly. That tells me that is an animal choice, not a beast. I don't have to find owl in the monster manual.
Right.
So I just
that's fair enough.
It allows for a in-game roleplay expansion while also not refining you to specific animal types in the monster manual.
Okay.
At level 8, the range of size was increased to large. Actually, I thought that was level 7. My notes are a little bit weird here. It was either level 7 or level 8 you were able to change into a large. I think it was level 8. At level 11, you were able to change into tiny animals.
Okay.
And level 15, huge, which I think that's pretty nice. I like that.
Wow.
I think hitting tiny before huge is way better, especially mid-game, being able to go into like as a mouse and then infiltrate. That's where I'm thinking, right? That's that mid-game kind of gameplay.
Yeah. No, I'm here for that.
Oh, that's right. Okay. The reason why I had two different things. In 3rd edition, it was large animal at 8. In 3.5, it was large animal at 7.
Okay.
I have my notes kind of always jumbled when it comes to those two.
Got you.
So for instance, in 3rd edition, it was 5, 8, 11, 15. What we just talked about. So small at level 5, small, medium at level 5, large at level 8, tiny at level 11, huge at level 8, at level 15.
Okay.
3.5, it was large at level 7, tiny at level 11, plants at level 12.
Okay.
Tiny at 11, plants at 12, huge at 15, and then 16 large elementals.
So
and level 20 huge elementals.
I'm assuming that these are just additives. Okay, so that kind of changes my thought process. But like, okay, if I get plants at level 12 and then I get huge at level 15, then
huge animals at level 15,
so
but plants at level 12.
So what size plants am I allowed to? Can I be a tree ant? Or is there a size restriction to the plants?
It just says plant creatures.
And so that means I can go all the way up to huge, because you did specifically say later that I can be huge elementals at a specific rate. So that means I don't get huge elementals when I get huge.
Correct. You get huge elementals at level 6, at level 20. So it probably would mean that the plant creature would probably be limited to the size that you have access to. So you'd probably be limited to large or smaller. I would probably call it like that as a DM. I'd probably say that until you unlocked huge at level 15, you got large or smaller plants. That would make the most sense.
Okay. But the ones that specify would be whatever that specific thing is.
Correct.
Okay.
And then a couple of the spell options here. So this is the first time in 3rd edition was the first time that druids got cantrips.
Oh.
So straight out the gate, they got.
I didn't realize they didn't get that.
So yeah, because while they were similar to clerics got cantrips, they didn't. So in 3rd edition, in 3.5, a few examples, they got like create water and purify food and drink. I think are phenomenal cantrips to have that early.
Wait a second, those are cantrips?
In 3rd edition, they were
wild.
But it made sense because in 3rd edition, it was more of that wasn't really like a mechanic that people were really concerned about. So even back then, it was more of a role play mechanic. Like those weren't really like spells you would benefit from in any way.
They weren't things that people were like overly concerned with making sure are happening. So it's just take care of it. Kind of like mending. Mending's a cantrip. Oh, you ripped your shirt. Here,
I look at it as like things like mending, create water, purify food and drink. These are things that I looked at as additives for when people started saying, I don't want to track rations anymore. So you know what? As long as someone in the party has purify food and drink or
you
purify water,
anything.
You don't have to, right? If you have a cleric and they have good berry, we never talk about food again.
Yes.
When you talk about like, why do you give players a bag of holding? So we stop talking about encumbrance, right? Like
True.
Mending, like you said, why do I give you mending? Why doesn't it get you? Like, it's great for roleplay purposes, but what mechanical purposes does it have? So we never have to go shopping.
Right.
You never have to worry about being in a fight. And then you go to the king and you look like scrubs. Right? Like there's a purpose of these ideas kind of, but the more creative you are, the more you can use them.
Yeah.
So moving on to 1st level, you get more entangle and cure light wounds. So you're still kind of playing that little, offensive, but you're still getting some other stuff. We continued with, we get flame blade. We've seen, you also get reincarnate at level 4.
Wait, what?
Reincarnate and control water. See, that was 3rd edition. Yeah.
Oh, I'm still in beasts. I'm like trying to look up this spell. I'm like,
Reincarnate.
it's a 5th level spell. What is it? Is it saying it's a 4th level spell there?
I have it as 4th level. Did I get that wrong?
Well, this is 5th edition. So it very well. I'm just because I thought reincarnate was such a higher level spell. I thought it was like 7th or 8th.
Nope, reincarnate druid spell level 4 in 3rd edition.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
I always have to double check my stuff. You know what I mean? I was like, I do so much of this like reading. It's like you never know if the source I saw without the books, right? So yeah, reincarnate and control water, and then level 5th, animal growth again, and then wall of thorns.
Wall of Thorns.
Yeah, I like that one over wall of fire.
I do like that one for what it is.
Can you imagine the cheese grater tactic with that one? Just push them against the wall of thorns.
Bro, that would be wild.
And then again, spontaneous summoning. So this one basically allowed a druid to take any prepared spell and convert it into a summoning spell of the same level or lower.
Convert it into a summoning spell.
A summoning spell of the same level.
So
or lower.
it has. What do you mean by convert it into a?
So let's say you had a level 4 spell like reincarnate, but you're not going to use it.
Okay.
You go find a summoning spell of level 4 or less, and then you can cast that spell instead.
That's just
so even if it's not on your spell list, as far as I understand it, it could be because I don't think you have all of the summoning spells. So as far as I understand, this was basically you could just convert it to a summoning spell.
Interesting. I'll definitely have to look into that.
Oh, actually, hold on. Oh no, there was. I have a note here. So actually, there was a specific set that they could call from. So the summoning spell that they were able to do was. This is where I kind of missed some of the notes. But it was something called Summon Nature's Ally. Was a series of summon spells. So there's a category of summon spells under Summon Nature's Ally those are the spells that you could convert to.
Okay.
So we would have to look up those. I couldn't find anything specific for examples.
Okay.
But there was a specific set.
And this is which edition?
This is 3.5. And we have a posture check and a hydrate check. Thank you so much, Hecate. Taking care of the water and the posture.
Yes, please and thank you.
But yeah, so yeah, there was a specific set of these like summoning spells that fell within this like category. So we'll have to look those up at another time because I wasn't able to find specifically where I could get like all of those spells from.
Got you.
I should have though. I should have been able to get a little bit on the list. Oh, my bad. Okay, I did have a little bit of notes. Summon Nature's Ally was a summoning spell, and you would cast it at a level equal to, I guess, your spell, but I think it only had certain levels, right? So like Summon Nature's Ally 3 was like the 3rd level version of that spell.
Interesting.
So there were only a certain number of those, so maybe it only went up to like 3 or 4.
Goes up to 9.
Summon Nature's Ally?
Yeah.
Okay. So you could literally take any of your spells and turn it into an equal version of Summon Nature's Ally.
So it's 9th level, you get Pixie and Storm Giant.
Is each level just different things that you can choose from?
Kind of. Like each level has its own description.
Okay.
And I think each level has its own like special abilities. Like level 9 says this spell's function summons Nature's Ally 1, except that you can summon 1 9th level creature, 1d3 8th level creatures of the same kind, 1d4 plus 1 or lower level creatures of the same kind. So you get kind of like variations. I feel like it's very similar to the Conjure Animals spell that druids normally get at level 3.
So I really do like that though. I love that by default I could take any one of my spells and get that equal version of that particular spell in tandem. Again, if I'm not going to use my reincarnate spell, honestly, I could use that as level 4.
This feels very akin to the reverse of what sorcerers can do with their sorcery points, how they can they convert their spells into sorcery points and whatever, but this is just you cannibalizing your spell into a summoned creature.
For instance, what's level 4 of that? This Summon Nature's Ally 4.
All right.
Because I'm thinking like reincarnate would probably be the one spell I would hold on to a lot, but then
never use.
Just decide to convert.
So it says the spell functions like Summon Nature's Ally 1, except that you can summon a 4th level creature. So it's basically a equal level creature or a number of creatures of lesser level. Right.
Okay, cool. That's cool. I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I kind of miss that. I mean, I never played with it, so I don't miss it as in I've used it.
Right. But yeah,
I kind of feel like that's missing from 2nd or for 5th edition.
I really think that should be like Summon Nature's Ally should kind of be like a druid class feature,
like a default.
Yeah, like it's just a default. Like this is a part of your base race or base class,
right?
Mm-hmm. I think that it falls right in line with like how I feel like rangers should have Hunter's Mark as just like a base feature instead of a spell,
like an innate ability.
Like, but the fact that yes, I'm cannibalizing this spell slot and I'm turning it into boom this summon. So okay, no, I'm super here for that. That's very cool.
So let's see. So I had some notes on balancing here. Okay, so that was pretty much it for 3rd edition Druids. I only had some notes on just what like balancing in combat, but basically it was just why it was, it takes your whole action, so it does take a whole turn, kind of like any spell to do the summoning. Mm-hmm. And pretty much the Summon Nature's Ally was basically just focused for Druids because it was kind of like their thing to do.
Right.
All right, so we're just going to kind of blaze through 4th edition because no one really cares. But 4th edition, obviously they did a lot of major shifts. They turned the Druid into what they called, they had these different types of classes. So they called it a controller class, basically kind of like your crowd control, I guess. It was like just, a lot of battlefield management. They had 2 primary features. They had humanoid and beast form. So the Druids had these 2 forms, right? So unlike wild shape, you had humanoid and beast form. And they had like the different types of powers that you could use in each form. Very, very strange. They changed the source of power for Druids. So in 4th edition, they called it the primal power. And it was basically a whole new version of where people got their powers from and explained a bunch of lore differences. And this one represented like ancient elemental forces, was like the representation of it.
Interesting.
They were trying to make it a little bit more of a jack of all trades. They tried to give it more offensive and defensive with some utility. They really just tried to like
do a little bit too much.
Yeah. Let's see.
What happens when people try to do all the things?
Yeah, because they did the roll system. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, they gave them all the way up to 30th level in 4th edition, which is kind of crazy. But you can go all the way up to 30th level.
Interesting.
They had these things called Paragon Paths. So at level 11,
I do remember
chose
those.
like a Paragon Path. It was kind of their version of subclasses at later levels. And then at level 21, you had like an Epic Destiny, which was like yet another elevated like subclass at later editions.
Interesting. Okay.
And Wild Shape was now this like at will power. So it was just a straight up, I could do it whenever I wanted.
Okay.
But it was solely used to shift between the humanoid and beast form. So you didn't get shape changing that way we know it now or before. It was you could just at will change to your beast mode or your humanoid form.
And so beast mode meant one thing.
Yeah. It was just your two forms. Your beast form was just a kind of like a more bestial like humanoid version, right?
Interesting.
It was basically to make it more combat focused.
Right.
The beast form gave it different abilities in battle. So you change into the beast form to gain access to certain abilities, and then you change back to get access to different abilities in humanoid form.
Mm-hmm.
So different variations of what to do in combat. Let's see. The significant changes was basically that some changes to their powers. They had these at-will powers other than their shape change. They had something called Flame Seed and Grasping Claws.
Flame Seed and Grasping Claws.
Yeah, I didn't have time to look into these specific ones.
Okay.
They had a couple others. They had like this thing called Thorn Whip, which was like an encounter power. Sounds kind of cool, but it sounds kind of weak if it's only one time an encounter.
They do have Thorn Whip in future editions.
They had a daily power called Summon Pack Wolf.
Summon Pack Wolf?
Yeah, so that sounds kind of interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically, again, with 4th edition, they changed so much, it's hard to relate. It's really hard to discuss it without really going into detail about what 4th edition is.
Right.
So moving on to 5th edition. This is the one that we all kind of know and love, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but it brings it back into the world that we know. A lot more flexible. They say it's a more connection to nature, but as we've talked about, it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
Yeah.
They have become a lot more versatile, but I don't necessarily, now that we've gone through them all, I won't necessarily say they've become more versatile as a good thing. Don't necessarily say that the versatility was a benefit. I kind of liked what the older versions were leaning towards in terms of their role in the party and their role in the world. I'm not as happy with this idea that they're just another support character that can kind of do it all.
Yeah. No, I definitely more like the idea of them being like support characters. A great place for Druid. Like it would be cool if you had like an attack version or whatever, but those would be the exceptions. Like as a general rule, your role is built for support, and there's plenty of different like support aspects you can go down,
a lot of different directions that you can do. So with 5th edition, we got the primary key differences where you had like your two, at least when it first, obviously we have a lot more now. So This is just like the history of when it was first released. When 5th edition came out, they had two primary versions of Druid. You had your Circle of the Moon and Circle of the Land. One being spellcasting focused, the other being wild shape focused.
Okay.
So that was how they first came out, because these were the new Druid circles.
And I get that.
So the land was all about spellcasting. Like the circle of land was all about enhancing your spellcasting. The Moon Druid was all about improved wild shape abilities.
And that is very much what, like, I feel like Circle of the Moon did, like, from my perspective, the best job of highlighting what it looks like to focus and double down on being a wild shape druid. Like, that's what you do.
But it was, speaking of wild shape, it was simplified quite a bit compared to, our other ones. They were basically able to shift into animals. And then of course that was increasing, as they went up. And of course, Circle of the Moon Druids were given more focus as they leveled up to do more stuff with it. Of course, with spellcasting, they still wanted to focus on nature, healing, and summoning. So that's where we're at right now. I still feel like their healing's probably a little bit not as focused on. They're still kind of,
they have very
away.
There's even the subclasses that they have are not super
capable of healing. I would definitely say that the healing and the battlefield control have waned. Less on the battlefield control. They still have some, but not nearly as much as they used to.
Yes.
I definitely say it's the summoning and offensive support that they're there for. They're much more of an offensive support than they are a defensive support. And that's really all they're at. They're at that support level.
Yes. I do really agree with that.
We have a this or that question. Our first one.
Oh.
Touch, spread death, or deteriorate, bomb death. Are those spells?
Touch, spread death, or deteriorate, bomb death. Those do not sound like spells to me.
Okay, well, it's a this or that, so we get no context. We have to choose based off just the question. We don't get to look it up. We just have to, based off of that. So I think of, when I hear that, I think like touch, spread death means if I touch something, it will start to die and it will spread, right? You touch like a leaf on a plant and the whole plant will die.
Mm-hmm.
Deteriorate, bomb death sounds more like an explosion an explosion of deterioration. Like anything it touches will deteriorate.
So assuming this question is targeted at the person that is going to be implementing this type of death.
Yeah.
And my idea is I want the most effective type of death there is. When I hear touch, spread death, I also think of like, oh, this is contagious just by touching.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, kind of like that curse spell that we talked about not too long ago.
I mean, touch, spread death sounds interesting in terms of the visual, but the deteriorate, bomb death, I feel like is more controllable. It's more methodical, and like you said, it's like if I know what I'm going to do with it, I'm not going to mistake. I'm not going to accidentally do a bomb. I feel like the touch spread is something that I could accidentally do. So my choice, deteriorate, bomb death.
And because I'm more chaotic, for sure, my choice is touch, spread death.
There you go. Congratulations, Hecate. Thank you. That was our first one.
I love it.
All right. So where were we? We were looking at the spells. So they try to become more utility. I was interesting when I was reading up on this. There was some interesting discussions, and some people were like, yeah, the druids are going back to their roots, like they're getting back to their old ways. And I'm just like, wow. I mean,
honey,
compared to 4th edition, sure, if we ignore all the other editions and just look at compared to 4th, sure, it's going back to its roots.
Okay.
But because it's like it's going back to being a support class. That's about as rooty as it's gonna get. But I'm just like, I found that comment funny. I'm like, this is not at all what druids used to be. Like, not in a bad way or like not in a great way. It's just this is not really going back to the roots. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Oh, hey, that actually helps apparently more than we know, and I don't know why.
I'm here for it.
Like I said, that's why I love this and that. That's why I created that like little one, because I love the idea that we have to answer without context. We just,
right.
They don't explain anything. It's just a straight up, we just have to answer exactly as is. I love that.
Fire.
Let's see. So, we've dropped back down to a max level of 20 from 30 from 4th edition.
Yep.
And Of course, later we got more additions to subclasses, right? We got more subclasses.
Sure.
More
Oh, yeah,
circles.
yeah.
These were just the two that it really like started out with.
I can spit off just the names of the other ones if you want.
Yeah, just the names. We don't really need to go into all of it because this is just where it really started.
For sure.
As it is right now, it's been obviously like expanded upon. But yeah,
sure.
you go.
So you obviously have the ones we just talked about, the land and the moon, but you also have blighted. You also have dreams. You have the circle of the shepherd, a circle of the spores, circle of the stars, and then circle of the wildfire. So there's definitely an interesting spread, and they probably fall in several different categories, but yeah.
Okay, and then a couple other small notes. Obviously, it started out as being able to wild shape twice per rest, short or long.
Yes.
And then obviously we expand from there. Also, they did make some extra notes in 5th edition that they retained your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores, further allowing you to basically keep your mental faculties. Yeah.
So when you say, when does, and this is something that I always was confused on, from what I recall, you only get 2 wild shapes until 20th level. And then at 20th level, you get unlimited. But the only thing that increases is how long you can stay in those wild shapes.
Interesting.
I will say I'm pretty sure that you get your wild shapes back on a short rest.
Yeah.
So
there is
that, but outside of that, it's like, you know, you get 2, maybe 4 a day, unless your DM lets you short rest as much as you want.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
like right after everything. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting that you really have to wait till 20th level to get any more than 2. That is a little bit strange.
Wild.
I would definitely change that if I were in charge. Let's see. So wild shape with 5th edition. At 2nd level, you were able to start transforming into any beast that is a CR quarter and no flying or swimming.
Okay.
Level 4, you are restricted to swimming. At level 4, there is no more restriction on swimming.
Yes.
Level 8, there's no more restriction on flying. And if you were the Circle of the Moon Druid at level 2, you'd be able to transform with a CR as high as your level divided by 3.
Yes.
Interesting.
So at the 6th level, you could do CR2, which is actually pretty crazy.
Oh, and if you're Circle of the Moon Druid, you never have flying or swimming limitations.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Because again, they're all about focused on wild shape.
And then some examples for spells that were specific to the Druid in this particular, we got cantrips again.
Yep.
So Druid still have cantrips. So we got like Druid Craft and Produce Flame. Entangle's always been around. I always like to add that one because that one's just such a classic one.
Yep.
But you get Cure Wounds, you get Moonbeam,
Love Moonbeam.
Freedom of Movement, Ice Storm. Now you get Reincarnated as level 5, Mass Cure Wounds. So actually, it sounds like a little bit more like a healer nowadays. Like you're getting a little bit more of those.
You're definitely getting access, and this is just my gripe for 5th edition in general. Like there is not a very good place for a healer role.
Yeah.
Like just in general, when it comes to how you heal in 5th edition, either it's magic or you got a healer's kit. Like there's really not much else. I mean, you got like stupid expensive potions. Like 50 gold for a healing potion, pretty standard. Yeah, that does like 2d4 plus 2. Like it's crazy. So I feel like there should be more when it comes to healing in 5th edition. Like we can just do better in that sense. I feel like what exactly that looks like, not 100% sure yet, but still, I feel like it's worth looking into. But
we have another this or that.
Oh,
Hunger and Conquest or Death and War.
Hunger and Conquest or Death and War.
I'm gonna go Hunger and Conquest because for 2 reasons. I'll give 2 reasons even though we don't have to, but I'm gonna choose Hunger and Conquest because it, in one respect, plays more to the human condition, right? You were always hungry for growth. You're always hungry for more. And Conquest is just another achievement, right? So no matter how much you achieve, you're always wanting more. So I agree with that mindset. It is the human condition. But Hungering and Conquest is ever gaining more, but not quite able to sustain it all. Right? You're if you look at it from conquest of land, but you're never able to feed all your people. Versus death and war, same concept. They're always feeding each other. War feeds death. Death comes with war. Death comes with war. So if there's death and war, that means that you're killing to maintain the war, which will in itself maintain the death and the war. It's an everlasting cycle. And to me, I'd much rather have a mindset of achievement, even at sacrifice, achievement over sacrifice versus subjugation for
I really appreciate how differently that we look at these things. Because weirdly enough, I'm thinking much more on like a personal and more psychological basis when it comes to things. And as I dive more into like, human characteristics, like there are elements of all of us, like we are at war within ourselves fairly constantly with like who we want to be, with like our carnal instincts and like our actual desires. And a lot of the times those things very separate from us. So I feel like there's a very important part of a life cycle that requires death. Right. And so I also feel like one of the best things for us, a lot of what you and I do on this show is we have iron sharpening iron, right? Your perspective versus my perspective. There's always conflict there. And I think that conflict breeds death, like you were talking about. But sometimes that is a valuable death, depending upon what you choose to allow to die. So for me, I really appreciate the concept between death and war. Hunger and conquest, for me, feels a lot more akin to people who are never satisfied, who it's like, oh, I'm always hungry, I always want more, I'm always trying to consume, I'm always trying to take. And conquest feels like I have to conquer, I have to be lording over, I have to be, this kind of like overlord mindset, like very much a control aspect. So I would say my choice would be death and war. But yeah, that's right. That's very interesting.
I'm liking that one. I hope we get more of those. That's a cool little question.
I like this or that. I've never done this before. That's good.
Oh, okay. So these are.
I'm assuming these are for the subclass that you're creating, which is wild. But
kind of cool though.
I don't know where this is going, but I'm here for it.
All right. Well, we're down to the last couple pages, y'all. We only have a brief history. I say brief. Of going over the alignments and just kind of like the idea behind the alignments, and then we're going to go over the actual Druid hierarchy, and that's it. And we're done.
Okay, let's get it. I'm excited for the Druid hierarchy for sure.
Yeah, me too. That one's going to be a good one. So let me just kind of let me just read over my notes on the alignment, see if I can kind of paraphrase a lot of this, because we're already almost 3 hours in, and I really want to get to the hierarchy. I want to spend more time on that. So let me just kind of breeze through this. So the alignment, the whole purpose behind the alignment was, again, to help dictate, decisions, interactions, and character flaws, character features of the classes, right? And being neutral just meant constantly keeping, the greater things in balance and making sure that your bias, early stages, that your bias didn't tip those scales. Whereas later, they understood that you're allowed to tip the scales as long as you're not breaking the balance.
Right.
But again, usually viewed as leaders or at least arbiters, ambassadors, even guardians of some sort. So they were always revered.
Yes.
For their knowledge and for their understanding. So in first edition, the initial approach was to represent or symbolize the Druid's commitment to nature and the balance of all things. So that's why they said that staying neutral really just embodied your idea that nature has no good and evil. Nature has will.
Only balance.
The will to survive. Yeah. You have the will to defend yourself or you don't, right? So that's where we start with, and of course the lore, right? In first edition in OD&D, the idea behind it is all of the references that we had of druids in mythos were very, pacifistic, right? They were neutral. They were protectors of their area, but they stayed out of politics.
Did druids have a lot of like religious inclinations or backgrounds? Did a lot of their stuff revolve around almost like worship of, you know, nature and things of that nature?
So, no, the earlier forms of Druid weren't as religious and spiritual in that particular sense, right?
Okay.
In terms of they had an approach and understanding of a greater cosmos, a greater being, a greater power,
Sure.
but they didn't revere it in the same context as religion. It wasn't a servitude, it was a relationship. It was this is the natural order of how the world works, and that is just how it is. And I see that.
Interesting.
It isn't I am here to serve this purpose. It is I see it, therefore I shall maintain it.
Interesting.
So again, it's that calling aspect, right? It's like, you know, a fighter doesn't know why he needs to beat people up to feel better. It's not about hurting another individual, right?
Right.
It's just about challenging yourself to be better. It's that same calling. It's why wizards want to learn harder spells, right? A druid just sees the way things are and goes, yes, this needs to be maintained.
Okay.
And the idea too is that the reason they stayed neutral lore wise was also so that they would not be influenced morally or ethically in the ways of the world, right? Their idea was to maintain a balance, and by staying neutral, again, they don't inflict their own biases on how things should, you know, fall through.
Right.
Second edition, the biggest change in terms of our alignment choices were because druids were now being put into the party role of the ambassador, the mediator of sorts. The neutral alignment was there. The true neutral alignment was put there to make sure that they were able to embody that position. And again, not take the standard route, because it's kind of that whole thing of like, if you're gonna have a party leader, that's fine. You know, they're gonna talk for the party. They're gonna be the courageous one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you might have one that has a high charisma, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to truly represent anything other than the selfish ideals of themselves or the party. So in order to truly say this role is representative of a mediator, you needed that limitation of then you can't actually be, you know, selfish, right? You can't be someone who has a moral objection to something and have a mindset about it, right? Like, if you know, imagine a druid who, you know, realize that their forest is infested and would be so furious that they would be willing to burn it down. You can't have that as a druid, right? You can't have a druid they would be that aggressive, you know, in one way.
I mean, at the very least, that would it'd be very counterproductive. And maybe a druid got to that point, or maybe they, you know, I think a lot in these situations, like Luke Skywalker, you can't have a Jedi that is like Anakin, like how Anakin was. Like, you can't, like, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to turn into the Sith.
Exactly.
You're going to get lured that direction. And so it's like, if you end up falling in that direction, there's usually a reason for it, but that reason takes you wherever it takes you.
And it usually takes a lot more than just a single action, you know.
Sure.
And that's where it's like, you know, you could look at this as saying that this is going to prevent me from being able to, you know, quote unquote, do what I want to do as this character. But again, it's mainly there to just say that is your position, right? Like, that was the whole purpose, is for you not to build a character that would have such a one-sided opinion, right? So,
and if that's what you wanted,
and you can always be pushed there,
yeah.
But the overall purpose was never to be that, right? And that's where the narrative is fun, right? That's why I like these early editions, because the narrative was all about that. It was all about, you know, what is the story doing to your character, not just this is how my character is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I really
very much so
leaned in on that, where it was you have an expectation, you have a direction, but hey, the story's going to do what the story does, man.
I mean, facts.
And that's exactly why. See, I never look at something like alignment as a limitation, especially when D&D puts in penalties. Because if you say, hey, here's alignment, it's supposed to direct all your decisions, but if you go against it, here's a penalty, you know what that's telling me? then I'm allowed to go against it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that.
Right.
It's kind of like what's the phrase? Like illegal for a fine is illegal for a price.
Any law that only has
the punishment's a fine, it's legal for a price.
And
that's exactly what
it's only legal for poor people.
But that's kind of the idea behind it, right? Like that's kind of what I like about the mentality behind D&D's alignment system is
it's only illegal for a price.
Yeah, it's the whole point of you're not mechanically told you cannot do that. It's just a suggestion of you really shouldn't based on who you are. But hey, a paladin is allowed to lose their paladinhood. You could justifiably tell me that 99.9% of the time the paladin would never do anything to lose their paladinhood. But it's not a rule for nothing. You know what I mean?
It doesn't exist. It exists there for a reason.
If the rule said the paladin couldn't go against their paladinhood, then there wouldn't be a rule against losing paladinhood. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Like, there wouldn't be.
If it were literally against the rule, then there wouldn't be a punishment for it. Let's see. Third edition, their mentality for the true neutral, or again, they got away from true neutral, allowed you to be any of the neutral alignments. And this was their mindset was the true neutral limitation didn't really play, kind of like you were saying, to the natural desires of players and the in-game usage, right? The traditional, legendary, mythological druid was a true neutral. No one's going to argue that. And that's where a lot of, again, those first early editions got a lot of their influence from.
Right.
But that's not to say that that is how it should be. In sense of just because that is how the tradition was doesn't mean that that's going to make for good gameplay.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that's how people are going to use it, right? Like you could base a class off of Merlin, but not everyone's going to play Merlin.
Yes.
You could base the fighter class off of Conan the Barbarian, but not everyone's going to play Conan. You know, some people are going to want to play, like a ninja, and that's just going to be how it's going to be, right? You could base these things off of anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what people want to use it for. And that's what I like about third edition is they were like, look, you need to believe in balance, but you also have a mind of your own. You know,
that's fair.
Balance is a perspective.
It's a relative concept. It's very much so.
And so being able to be lawful neutral versus chaotic neutral versus, neutral evil, like I'm okay with all of that. It gives you a lot more flexibility to decide, like, what does my neutrality mean? Where am I neutral, right? Like, where do my belief systems happen?
Yes.
Because again, you could have one druid who's all about, you could consider them, like neutral evil. They're all about conquest because all of their affinities are animals that move and conquest, right? And take over areas. So the entire druid could be about that balance of nature, that nature must evolve. Some creatures can't just live in one spot. They have to follow the water. They have to follow the rain. So
they migrate, whatnot.
Yeah. So what if you had a druid that was based off of a migratory animal that was also a predator? You could be evil because you believe that when I show up, all the resources are mine. Right?
I take what I want.
And then I move on. But I'm never going to, but your balance is, but I never stay. I never stay. I never use up all the resources and I don't kill off everything. I leave it. Why? Because I'm going to need to come back one day. So while I will come in and use up your resources and be evil and selfless, I will always make sure to maintain that balance that I need you to be able to recover. So when I come back, you have resources for me again. Never dam up a river because you might need the water again. Never kill off all of the antelope because you might come back through here to hunt one day. Never eat all the grass because you might need, something, right? So I could see a druid doing that.
Fair.
Oh man, you want to get more into it? Why isn't there a bacterial druid?
A what?
Like a bacterial druid, like a druid spores. Who's about like the spores. But I'm thinking about like more like that's still plant based to me. I'm thinking about like a druid that's all about like the like micro animals. So like
interesting,
ants smaller. So it's like they follow these ideas of swarms. Like their whole mindset is they like, imagine that druid, that mindset is they hate being alone and they hate anything that like they find a hermit and they're like, that's
disgusting.
That's against nature, because their mindset is swarms. They're like, no, you need to be surrounded by people, right? Like, these could be such unique approaches to druids, because all you have to do is attach yourself to something that could be in balance, could keep balance in nature, and that could be your druid.
This is very fair. That's very fair.
Let's see. So 4th edition, they kind of adjusted the alignment, but that was because they did something completely different. They're a commander now. They, you know,
did they just kill it completely?
Basically, there were no alignment requirements in 4th edition primarily. Like the vast majority of all alignment requirements for most classes were gone.
That's what I figured.
Yeah,
that's what I figured.
And then 5th edition, there are no strict alignment requirements. But so again, 5th edition has changed it to where the lore suggests, but there is no mechanic. But lore suggests that you should be leaning more towards a neutral form of alignment, but there is no requirement for it in 5th edition. You can be whatever kind of druid you want to be.
Got you. Okay.
And again, most of the alignment requirements were meant to be more thematic. It was how you played the character. It was how you made relationships and how you approached situations, right? It wasn't meant to be a limitation. It was meant to be a guidance on how you wanted to do things. All right, and that was everything there. So now we are officially on the last part here, and at 3 hours, we are actually making fantastic.
We're doing great. We're doing great. Hey, we didn't do 6 hours. We Gucci.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so now we are on the actual hierarchy of how the druid system works. And again, this was early editions based off of lore, legend, mythos, and then eventually evolved into a more game-friendly approach.
Right.
Again, so going back to the original D&D, druids were always meant to be seen as leaders, teachers, mediators, arbiters. Again, the idea was that these were people who, while maybe not a prominent figure in most of society, were ones that were revered for what they knew and the decisions that they made.
Right.
And they were trusted to be that neutral point. They were trusted that they would take everything into account, and perception of fair or not, the decision would be made fairly.
Okay.
Because there's a difference between fair and fairly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I may not think the decision is fair, but on a grand scheme of things, if it was made fair, like consider our court system. It may not be fair to have 12 random people judge me based off of things that no one technically can prove.
Right.
But is it fairly done to give an argument with the best of my abilities and the best evidence I can?
Is there opportunity for that fairness to reveal itself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deciding that, you get more money than me on a job may not be fair, but if it were fairly decided that you did more work, there's a whole bunch of stuff that could be decided about what's fair and fairly done. So I do kind of like, that whole concept of these weren't the elusive hermits that so many people try to play the druid as. These were revered characters. These were characters that when they came into town, people cared. You know what I mean? Like if there was a town meeting at the town hall and the druid walked in, everyone hushed up. Right?
Everybody's like, oh, what do they got to say?
Exactly. Like this wasn't the scary old man down the road that everyone thought was a kook. This was, think Merlin. This was the advisor to a king, the king who ran an entire, kingdom. This is the kind of guy that in rags would walk into his court and he would hush up and go, yes, what do you want?
Right? Like, yeah, what do you have to say? I'm here to listen.
Like there's just, to me, druids are actually not respected enough in gameplay. I think too many people treat them as hermits and the odd crazy ones, and not the the prolific the decision makers.
Right. Interesting.
Let's see here. So in first edition, we got some unique insights into the hierarchy, and then second edition developed that even further. So in first edition, the limits were set at most of the highest titles. So in a game world, that means as a DM, your game world, When you started a game world, this was your limit. And then if I started a different game world, this was my limit, right? So this was an actual hard limit based on the books, is that there could only be one Grand Druid per game. So period. In your game setting, one Grand Druid.
Okay.
Below that, you were allowed 9 Archdruids below that one.
Okay.
And then below them, 27 Great Druids.
Okay.
And that was it. That was the hierarchy of the Druid echelon for your entire game.
I mean, it's less restrictive than one of each level.
Yeah. I don't know where I got that. That probably was just a bad note taking.
Well, that might be another edition. I mean, this is just.
Or it could have been. Actually, that was probably from OD&D from the supplement. It was probably the supplement had the one.
I thought it was in like second edition or something like that. That it said that.
Well, let's see, because this is still first edition where you had all of those, and then the challenges. In order to get into these ones, you had to challenge the druid that held that rank to a duel. And usually non-lethal, so it wasn't full-on combat.
We're not trying to kill you, but yeah.
But you had to basically prove that you were not only worthy, but like more worthy than them, right? Like just because they held it for a long time, you had to prove that it was your turn to hold that mantle, or you were more suited for it. So the non-lethal combat could be anything from just straight spell casting to, they might the druid might put you under tests. Like, let's say this happens to your forest. What do you do?
Kind of like the Kobayashi Maru.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's a lot of fundamentals that the DM had to play with, because again, none of this was set in stone that early.
Right.
So the DM's got to have a lot of fun with what does that mean for a druid to prove themselves, and for another druid to give up their position.
Okay.
And then if you won, you would advance. And then if you didn't win, if you actually lost the challenge, you'd actually have to, the biggest hurt was that you had to find another druid. So you wouldn't be able to re-challenge the same druid.
Interesting.
So, there's only so many you can challenge, so you can't fail that many times.
It's fair. That's very fair.
And part of the roles and responsibilities is that with these, you also got unique spells and powers once you advance into these levels. So they actually locked down some of the higher level gameplay in favor for you having to earn it. And I kind of like that. I mean, it's still like leveling up, but I kind of, like I said earlier, this wouldn't work in 5th edition, but I kind of like that built-in gameplay.
Right. No, I definitely feel that.
Second edition, clearly more defined the ranks, and we're going to get into those here in a second. But second edition also specified and added a few more specific roles within the communities, like and responsibilities. So just refine a little bit what the expectations were once you got to certain ranks. And second edition also added more of like the day-to-day lore, like the more ground level lore,
like what their communities look like
druidic rituals, communities, meetings. So they actually they're called moots. Like they actually went that far as like a druidic
meeting. This is 5th edition?
Second edition.
Oh, okay.
So second edition, yeah, it was called a moot. So a group of druids meeting for druidic purposes is a moot.
Okay. All right, get you some.
And again, just more roles and the balance of what all their things are, but just a lot more of that background lore, that we wanted, right? Not just the hierarchy, but what's the purpose of the hierarchy? What are each of them doing with their positions? 3.5. And basically from there on out, 3.5, 4, and 5th edition all have the same layout. They basically kept the same basic structures, but they got away from the limitations. So right around 3rd edition, it's like, yeah, there are limited number of drones. Go talk to them. But otherwise, just level up, right? You got to go to levels 20. It doesn't matter. Lore-wise, if the DM chose to, you could go talk to druids and go challenge them, blah, blah, blah. But if you didn't have that as part of your campaign, it wasn't going to stop you from
Right.
And then other than that, they just changed focuses. 3rd edition, they focused more on like those initial circles. So the different areas, the different specialties, the Arctic, the forest, all of that. 4th edition, they just did their thing. And then 5th edition, trying to come back more to the circle's idea of splitting up your individual areas, but instead of it being regional, it was more belief system or connection to nature.
Okay.
And again, 5th edition's like, yeah, there's lore. There's supposed to be a limited number of druids at certain levels. Add it if you want. Yeah.
Figure it out.
No one cares. But here's how it worked. So, 1st edition, they built out the hierarchy, and then 2nd edition added on to this. So here's how the hierarchy of druid worked, starting with 1st edition. You would gain the title just straight out of druid at level 1 to 3. So level 1 up to level 3, you're just a druid. The lower levels, druids were basically referred to by their class. They had their basic abilities of spell casting. They, had the ability to turn into animals, do this, basic shapeshifting, or no, they had no ability to shapeshift at this point. And they really didn't have any of like these special immunities, right? They were just basically the first people to choose or recognize their attunement to nature.
Okay.
And realize that there's a future there. Like it was just I feel it. This is my path. 4th and 5th level, you became an initiate of the 1st circle. And then 2nd circle would be 5th and 6th to 7th level. So you would just have these initiate levels, right?
Okay.
Of the different circles. And the circles were just kind of the different categories of, hierarchy and stuff at that point, right? Like just here's the ideas, because at this point, the original circles were just the hierarchies. 2nd circles, the 2nd layer of circles was like the different zones. And then eventually they got into circles that were more about like what you chose to do with it, right?
Right.
So in this particular case, it's this, we're still in the phase of like more or less the hierarchies, but now we're getting also like there's hierarchies of the Arctic, but there's still these levels that you have to progress through.
Yes.
So as you advanced, you basically through the initiates of higher levels, you got more powers, more spells, and the highest circle you could get was like the 9th circle within the hierarchy.
Okay.
Things, right. Because again, there were 9 circles to represent the 9 archdruids. Like, so you had your great druid, your grand druid. You had the 9 archdruids, which basically controlled all of their circles, and there was kind of a hierarchy of that.
Okay.
After you became an initiate, you were able to become a druid of the 1st circle, 2nd circle, what have you, after you pass through initiate levels. So these would basically, you have 4 and 5, and then like 4, 5. I forget how all of this works. This is so confusing, because it's like it's not specifically just level based, right? Like,
right.
It's lore based, but it's also level based.
Yeah.
So there's not a 1-to-1 translation of when you get to this level, because there's 9 circles, but you don't get to the 1st circle until level 4. But there's not 9 levels until level 12, because that's when you make archdruid.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like you can be in an inner circle for up to like 2 levels, but you usually in game would be going through them a little bit faster than you're leveling.
Right.
So again, it's this duality of it's part of your actual level, but you also have to in game
find out how you're gonna play
how
that.
Progress. So it's like, you have the initiates stage, and then you have the druid of those circle stages after the initiates. And again, more in-game responsibilities, but just allow you to kind of develop yourself with that lore, which was, again, only really necessary for the highest of levels. If you really wanted to reach those like highest echelon of druid, that's when you wanted to be more involved with this level of advancement. But basically, between level 4 and level 11, you would be advancing as an initiate through the 9 circles, and then you'd be able to become a druid of those circles. Now, again, you didn't necessarily have to go through all of the 9, as far as I understood. It was kind of like each one. Again, if you were like from like, if I guess you could think of it more like the Hunger Games, right? You have different divisions or different zones.
Yeah.
Each of those zones would have their own hierarchy within them.
Okay.
So you could be an initiate of zone 1 or a druid of
I see what you're
zone
saying.
1,
Sure. Yeah.
But you didn't have to go from zone 7 to zone 1.
Got
to
you.
level up.
Okay.
You would be a druid of zone 1, and you may go to zone 2, But the idea is that you would be an initiate of that circle, and then you'd be able to be a druid of the next circle. But there was also each of the 9 circles would also have their own hierarchy. So 5 may be higher than 4. You didn't necessarily need to go from 4 to 5.
Right.
5 would be considered higher than 4 in game lore.
Okay.
Is that making any sense to anybody?
No, I'm following.
Again, it was very complicated back then, but it's I like the feel of it. It's just definitely very clunky. I will say the advancement was very clunky. But once you got to 12th level, this is when you were able to become an archdruid if you so chose. So at this level, you would be able to challenge one of the 9 archdruids for winning their position. A archdruid had control over large territories, and they would actually be responsible for significant natural events and balances. So whether or not forests needed to be on fire or not be on fire, like you were basically, if a natural disaster happened, you were the deciding factor of do we do anything about it or not.
Got you. So it's almost like you were in charge of like a whole quadrant of whatever forest or whatever, like whether you're a sand druid or an arctic druid or
you
whatever.
Have a zone that you're basically
interesting.
And there's only 9 of you, right? So there's 9 of these zones that essentially in your world you're going to be focused on, right? One of the 9 zones you will be responsible for, and then you'll have initiates and druids below you of each of your own circle. So you'll be the archdruid of a circle.
Is this the edition where circles were like that?
So with first edition, so we're still in first edition.
Okay, so never mind. No.
The circles are specific.
Circles
to like
are the ranks right now.
Yeah, basically the ranks within the archdruid. So that's why it's like again. So there's 9 archdruids. They have their own hierarchy among themselves, and then each of them have their own circle that has a hierarchy. So it's like you go through the hierarchy of their circle, but within each of them, if you go to a different circle, you might be considered better just by being in a better circle. So there's like 2 layers there that you're going through, which is why this made it just very complicated. But if you made it to level 12, you'd finally be able to take on an archdruid and have your own circle. At 13th level, you could take on a great druid and become a great druid. There were only 3 of these per campaign setting, and the great druid had more powers over actual elemental forces, and basically like the size and vastness of what you could do with your power, right?
Okay.
Like and the influence that you had. You were again one of 3 of 9 below you, right?
Okay.
And then of course at 14th level,
crazy.
At 14th level, which is the max level in first edition, you'd be able to challenge the Grand Druid.
Grand Druid. I do like that terminology.
And this is the pinnacle, of course. The Grand Druid of any game setting had the supreme power over all the druidic circles with abilities that affected the global balance of nature. So this was basically Merlin. Like this, if you're gonna call anyone Merlin, he is the Grand.
He's on top.
You have the number 1 druid. Below him, you have 3 of his basically generals. Each of those generals reside over the 9 archdruids. Each of them have their own circle. And within each of those circles, you have initiates and druids. So there's not, and then below that, you just have regular druids. So regular druids. So again, you could also consider it very much like Bleach, right?
Yeah.
In Bleach, when you go to Soul Society, you have the 9 houses, right? Or what are they called? Like the 9 groups or whatever. Because they all, so it's like you have the 9 houses, and then each of them have their own ranks, right? They each have a number 1 and a number 2, like the one who leads the house and the number 2 to that person. But each of those, right, out of all the houses, the leaders of those houses report to one of the generals, and then those generals report to like the highest Soul Reaper, right?
Yes.
That's exactly what this is. So even though you may be the lowest Soul Reaper in House 1, and you could become leader of House 1, right? So that would be like a circle.
Mm-hmm.
But while that's all nice and good, let's say you became a druid of the first house or this first circle, and then you wanted to become an initiate of the first circle. That's all nice and good, but a druid of the 5th circle may technically in-game lore be higher than a initiate of the first circle.
Right.
Because the 5th circle in general is higher than all of the others, right? So that's that. I'm trying to just find different ways to explain the double length of like, you may be a higher rank within your circle, but another circle's lower rank may technically be more important.
May outclass you.
Yeah.
Now, is that in terms of just respect and rank, or is this like in terms of like actual power?
I think it's both. I this is all up to the DM. At this point, it's 100. There is no in-game explanation, right? There's no rules as written. To me, the way that they've presented it is just like how you would look at it, like, like Bleach, right? It's not like those houses, those areas are specifically any more intentionally powerful, right? The person who runs a certain house may have high healing power, so that house is now all of the medics, right?
Sure.
The other one may be the strongest, so his house may be the army of the social society, right? So while the army guy is probably physically stronger, like that leader of that house is stronger than the leader of another house, their responsibility may be of equal importance.
Sure.
So I think it's not so much that Circle 9 of the Druids is more powerful than Circle 1 just because they're Circle 9, but Circle 9 may be the enforcers while Circle 1 may be the healers. Circle 3 may be admin and paperwork people.
Okay.
As an example, like
yeah.
So the idea that you may say that the forest is the strongest of the 9 circles, right? But if those from the desert have a different reason or a different purpose, the forest wouldn't do as well with them, right? So again, each of the 9
right.
And again, the in first edition it wasn't regional, it was just one of the 9 arch druids has a bunch of people underneath them, almost like a kingdom, right? A king has barons. Each baron has mayors. That's all this is it's just a delegation of power. Part of it's respect, but yes, some of those druids are just going to be more naturally powerful, and they're going to attract other druids beneath them of similar types, right? So again, if you have a healing druid, you're going to get a lot of healers behind them. They may not be aggressively powerful, but that doesn't mean that they're less important.
Yes.
And I like that. I kind of like how this structure works. It's still clunky, but I think I get it in terms of why you would have these different paths to take.
I definitely get why they chose to go the direction that they did. I do agree. It can be challenging to progress through, but I think about a lot of things. Like, there are certain players that are like, oh, we have to play with encumbrance. There's other players that like, I don't really want to care about that stuff. There's some people who's like, yeah, it's important for us to track our rations and to track our arrows, and some people just don't want to care about that stuff. So it really just depends on like the depth of gameplay that any particular character, player, DM is wanting to engage with. So,
and I like that it gives
that's fair
player,
enough.
It gives the DM and the player a lot to. 9 different archdruids means that there's 9 different mentalities of groups that druid could choose to join.
Right.
If he doesn't want to join an aggressive group of druids, you can make 9 different types, right? You can make him find what it is that he's looking for.
Yes, most definitely.
But yeah, I really like how this is done. I didn't get a lot of specifics on what each level unlocked power wise, but it was just, higher level spells and spells that could affect greater areas.
Okay.
So with second edition, we got quite a bit of changes. So the titles and circles got a little bit of, they were remaining similar, but there's a couple different changes. First off, we went from 9 to 10 circles. And then, so we have one more. So we have 10 circles now instead of 9.
Okay. And this is, you said 4th edition?
Yeah, this is the second edition.
Second edition, okay.
Because after this, they stopped carrying. After this was all lore based. So this was the last time we actually have like a structured rule set.
Structured settlement and you need cash now.
You still had to challenge to go to higher ranks.
I do like that.
Second edition did give more roles for the druid in the grander world. So before, this was all like secret society stuff. It was all like, hey, this stuff happens in the background. Second edition was like, no, these people are like needed. Like, these aren't just secretive people who meet and control the world. It's like, these are people who are like respected for control.
They're out here. Yeah.
So they had, actual things that they had to do, actually, not just say that they're there to protect nature, but actually were expected to do things, out there, and they were more revered for it. Like there actually was more expectation that if you had a higher level, druid title, the DM was expected to throw you things. Like if you made an arch druid, if you made it to arch druid, part of your gameplay would be dealing with squabbles between lower druids.
Sure.
One wants to burn half, one wants to let an old tree die out while the other one's like, we can't. Right. And it's like, okay, why are you guys arguing about this? Like, what's better for the nature, right? What is the benefit of keeping it alive? Oh, there's an owl that lives in there. Well, guess what? An owl can find a new tree. What's the benefit of letting it die out? Oh, all of these bugs and insects and all of these things will get fertilizer, and no, let it go. You as an archer would be deciding those things, and that would be expected of the DM to give you those kind of gameplay
Interesting.
aspects. Yeah. And this is that older mentality of the old games, right? They were, again, much more than just what you can do in combat.
Yeah.
And we'll get more details in just lore in general. So second edition, the biggest thing that they did was, as much as they still try to keep it lore based and narrative based, they also wanted to make it more, I don't want to say structured, more approachable for people to have a better idea of, like more examples. They wanted to basically say, here's a better foundation instead of just a nature person who has balance, right? Because before it was like, here's someone focused on nature and balance, have fun.
Right.
Now it's more about, well, you have more to do.
Yes.
Here's some responsibilities. Here's some more things you need. We need you to actually
pay attention here.
Represent
you need you to
nature, not
look
just,
at this. And yeah.
And I'm liking that, right? Like first edition really just like they set a good foundation, but second was like, it's too, you're there but not around, right? Like you're there, but what are you really here for? Now second edition's like we need some substantial reasons for this. So we got a few more fun stuff here. So with second edition, we did get, let's see. Oh yeah, so we got much more societal structure for druids, much more much more in line with some of the things we would expect for like clerics and their religion, like in terms of their hierarchy. We got more of an order in terms of everything. How you progress through it is a little bit more refined. Rituals, ranks were all more well defined. So now we get the ranks and roles. So now instead of starting off as just an unnamed druid before you get to get anything, in second edition, 1st to 9th level, or 1st to 9th circle, you start out with initiate of a circle. So you automatically start out as an initiate.
Okay.
Based on which circle that you're going to be following. Obviously that you, as an initiate, your whole purpose is to learn and practice from other members and learn the ways of this circle. You're basically just in that phase of understanding what is our purpose and what do we need to, how do we use our powers for the greater good of our circle.
What are we really about?
And the circle is just, what is our belief, right? What are we trying to maintain the balance of? Most of the responsibilities at this level, at these earlier levels, were basically managing small areas, groves, outskirts, maybe being an ambassador to a small town nearby, like basically just, low level local stuff, making sure that things stayed in balance, things that didn't get too damaged, making sure that the forest was tended to and grew properly. Again, that if there were a neighboring town, that you made good relations so they didn't come and deforest it, things of that nature, right? You were just, again, a representative of nature.
I feel that.
Eventually you'd be able to make it to a druid of the circles. Now before it was druid, then initiate, then druid again. So we're just dropping the regular druid because that was a little bit confusing. So you get initiate and now you become druid of the circle.
Sure. Okay.
And now at this point, because that was 1st to 9th level, and then about 10th level, you'll become a druid of the circle, which at this point you've proven your dedication to your fundamentals. And now you're going to get more, you're actually going to be given authority, official authority, and a little bit of, presence with that. As such, you, as a druid of a circle, you were basically now an official mediary, an official ambassador. Instead of just expected to maintain a good customer relations and make sure that you don't piss off the local town, and you help them out enough to where they don't want to come chop down the trees. Now you're actually like going into town and convincing them why they should get their wood elsewhere. You're the one convincing them how much wood they can take out of that. You're actually negotiating. You are there saying this is what we can and can't allow you to do. And you'll be expected to go out on missions. Kind of like, at a point where a cleric, the DM would be expected to give you these kind of missions. Go to this local town, talk on their behalf, convince someone of something kind of thing.
I'm here for that.
And then after that, you would eventually be able to make it to Archdruid after 10th level. Once you were able to do an Archdruid, you were then given a large territory to oversee. Remember, there's only 10 Archdruids at this point. You can manage several circles within this jurisdiction. Now, remember, in second edition, circles were more regional based. So you have Arctic circles. So you could be an Archdruid that has, say, a forest and a circle, of the forest druids and circle of the desert druids nearby.
Interesting.
Because you control a territory that has that overlap of their territories.
So it's who of you to understand both sides, like how things work in the Arctic as well as how things work in the desert.
So you may have grown up, say, in a circle of the desert druids, but you became an archdruid, and now your territory is expanded to encompass a forest. So now you have to go learn Forest of the Druid understandings. You are now expected to be able to handle their mindset, their outlooks, not just from where you came from. So you just have to learn more about your people and more about the different circles. So you're expected to have more of an understanding of balance. The Archdruids were given much larger areas, geographical areas. So you could be given multiple large forests, a collection of islands, basically like not quite continents, but
interesting,
like country level size levels.
Okay.
And your responsibilities ranged quite a bit. Your decisions were before you were just trying to maintain locale. Your decisions now are ecosystem level. You're making decisions on whether or not to make long-term, your decision will have long-term effects, right? Whether to let a fire burn and eventually come back, whether to let something melt the ice, if a fire is going to melt the ice too much and cause flooding. Your things, whether to build a dam, to let a dam be built or not, things like that will drastically change the landscape are under your control now.
Interesting.
If a forest wants to divert a river because it's going to help the forest, but you have to look at, you've all
other
decided
consequences is that going to have?
Yeah, it's you've all decided these are nothing but benefits to the forest, and I see that. But I, as an archdruid, now have to go look at what's downstream of you. Who else could be affected negatively or positively by this decision? Right. So those are some, again, cool things that you could do in gameplay that DMs I think would be shy to do nowadays. You are actually, as an archdruid, you're actually now also responsible for organizing those moot gatherings. Oh, okay. So that's kind of a fun little thing in game that you could do. If you continue to advance from there, you can become a great druid. These are only 3, and they oversee basically multiple archdruids. So these are going to be more like your continent level, or near continent level. Their most significant issue affects the natural world, not just weather, but the whole balance of things. So, the difference between whether a forest fire, how long it will take a forest to recover versus what we are starting to understand now, where if me as this great druid, I have a couple archdruids who are all handling forest fires, and I'm like, holy shit, guys, we're actually going to change the rain pattern way over here because of all of this.
Especially if we keep doing things at the rate we're doing things, because who knows, like fires have a very significant impact on the weather, right? Because you got all this hot air that's going up, changing weather patterns, doing different things. So,
or maybe you have druids that are, maybe there's a heat wave going on in the desert areas, which is affecting water evaporation, which is affecting ice growth, which is going to affect lake growth. Those are the ideas of a great druid. You are literally looking at what everybody is doing, and not just the trickle down effects, but you have to look at it from a much bigger picture of how is everything going to affect this over the next century.
Right.
And is that what we want? So again,
interesting.
I'm really liking the idea that you have a lot more responsibilities. You have a lot more approaches to things. This is also discussing, significance of the natural world, major threats like widespread disease. So whereas, some people, the arch would be caring about like the actual forest itself. This one's all, you'd be caring about like the spread of a disease from forest to forest, like, not just animal disease, but tree diseases, infested waters, corruption, all of that stuff matters to you, right? Large scale deforestations or an invasive species. It's like, you might think of that as like an arch druid or lesser for their forest, but it's much different when it's like on the mass scale of a continent.
Right.
And an arch druid may make decisions that accidentally infest their forest with an invasive species. Well, now it's the great druid who has to make sure that stays isolated to that forest, and the grand druid's idea to make sure that it stays isolated to never pop up anywhere else again, right? So they each have a different level of isolation and a different responsibility for it. The grand druid, the pinnacle, the echelon.
Top. And there's one of these?
Typically one per game world or continent. So they did give you the opportunity, depending on how big your game world is, to have more.
It's fair.
But
you would likely have a lot.
Yeah, so this one's more continent level, if you say so, or just one game world wise. But they hold almost mythical status and wield immense power. Again, Merlin. Just think of Merlin. They oversee the entire Druidic order, ensuring balance of nature itself across the whole world. It involves a deep connection, almost on a cosmic scale, with nature.
Interesting.
Even possibly communicating directly with the natural deities themselves, like the deities of nature.
So you would be like, "Hey, I need to speak to the earth god or something like that. Or I want to go talk to this fire deity or whatever."
Like, yeah, you're not worried about forest fires. You're worried about like nuclear fallout. You're worried about meteors. You're worried about earthquakes that will open up a chasm across the entire, continent. You're worried about the oceans boiling kind of thing. Right?
You know how we were talking a while back about your version of wizards and how they just mess with like, I'm pulling something from the fire plane. Like imagine some wizard was like pulling too much power or something, and he like rips open like a portal in a place that's gonna have a significant impact. Like you could have some arch druids that are coming around being mad at you for screwing up a lot. So I find that very interesting. There's lots of different ways players, DMs can play with that. And
it's also fun, it's also fun to just watch like the hierarchy too, because again, just reading upon this stuff, it's like I see a lot of the influences in the hierarchy of High Point. Just how I go about deciding who controls what and who's responsible for what. But yeah, I really do like they're basically the ones that like, they don't care if a river gets diverted. They want to make sure that the river's flowing. They don't care if the ice fall is less this year. What they care about is ice stop forming, year over year, right? They are the climate change masters. They're the ones that are actually in tune with everything.
All the freaking
and that's why it's very difficult for DMs sometimes to give out good, engaging narratives for this type of gameplay, which is why I think they went away from it. Because it's also, if you have an entire party of standard characters and then you have this, after a while it will feel like you're playing favorites. because you're kind of having to feed the druid.
I mean, yes, but it would be nice. Like, okay, so again, what level are we talking about for this? This is very high level gameplay.
Oh yeah, this is 15.
So if that's the case, then it would be nice if other classes had similar things like this, similar directions that they could go. Maybe you don't have circles, but maybe you have orders or something like that.
You become named in your class and you can get followers. So there were paths you could do. This one just seems a little bit more spoon-fed. Like, you know, more intentional.
There's a lot more content here for this. Okay, I hear that.
So in second edition, they kind of refined the advancement process. So again, they stuck with non-lethal combat, or at least non-lethal challenges. Really just trying to focus on showing off your skills, your knowledge, your power level in a variety of different ways, either directly, indirectly, solving puzzles, just basically being able to prove yourself. This could be done one-on-one, and it could just be a battle of honor system, or it could be done in the presence of other druids or of another governing body.
Okay.
And the whole point was just to prove that you have a more superior mastery over the necessary skills than the current holder of the title. So all you're doing is basically showing off. It's not about I'm better than you, I'm here to prove it. It's I can do better and it's necessary.
I could do this job better.
Yeah, it's about who's best for the job, not who is the better person. Again, most of these people are neutral, right? They're not going to be directly mad at you for doing it. If you beat them, they're going to be like, good luck. I hope you are what this position needs.
He's like, you better do a better job than I.
Yeah, it's less about pride and more about knowing it needs to get done.
Fair.
And if it's kind of one of those things where if a truly superior druid comes in and just wipes the floor with you, you're almost happy to relinquish it. It's yes, you do deserve this and it needs to be done because
then I guess you earned it.
Because now I have a different job. I can go and serve better than you can.
Theoretically, what if that happens to you as a player? Somebody comes up under you and somebody dethrones you. Now, do you lose level? Do you lose power? Do you just title? Okay.
So you would lose anything. Like if you were an arch and you got dethroned as an arch, you would no longer be an arch druid anymore. You'd go down to
in order for you to level up past that to like grand druid or whatever, would you
go back to arch? Yeah.
You would, but like, I guess no.
You don't lose your player level, but you do lose your hierarchy. So you'd go back to being a druid of that circle, and then you'd either have to move to a different circle to challenge a different arch druid, or you'd have to figure out the time frame to, probably like a year or whatever,
right,
you could challenge this new arch druid. That's usually like what you would do. Something like this, it'd be like a year before you could re-challenge them.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
The idea being that you're gonna honestly and honorably go and become better.
Exactly.
But because again, it's not supposed to be about pride. It should never be about pride. So why would you turn around and be like, you proved that you're better than me? No, I'm going to prove that I'm better than you the next day. Like, no, you got to go out and become better. Like the whole point was you admitted that they were better. Let them have the job. Because again, it's not about pride. It's not about I want it. It's about who needs it the best.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to be right back real quick.
Okay, so the meetings and gatherings. So when you're an arch, when you become the arch druid, you were required to make the arrangements for these moots, these secret meetings between druids. And most of the times these secret meetings were specific to problems and threats of the natural world. They would talk about strategies for maintaining balances, issues that are pertaining to their area or that particular order. And of course, the higher druids would be there to, move their influence around and make the decisions that the lower end druids couldn't. So these were good opportunities for DMs to develop more relationships, allow the druids to meet other druids and to kind of get a more dialogue-based gameplay, be able to make these decisions and have these problems. It was also a way for them to meet the higher druids that they'd be able to challenge, figure them out, see which ones that they might want to go after. And it was also a good way to, these were good opportunities to get players to meet the different types of circles. So if you did put the time in to make different personalities and different approaches to being a druid, you'd be able to introduce them at times like these, and the player could then choose to migrate over or go somewhere, go to a different one and have a better gaming experience. Let's see. And yeah, that was pretty much it. The whole purpose of all of this was, again, to give players a directive, right? A direction to go, not a set. It wasn't meant to be a hard set standard of rules. It was just meant to be a idea that they didn't want to create just another spellcaster. They wanted to create something with more of a purpose, not just beat 'em up, not just healer. They wanted to create something that had good lore, that had good history, and had good motivation to do certain things, give the player controlling it the opportunity to kind of take this class where they wanted to. And I feel like they did a good job at making this so robust that these earlier level of druids, I gotta say, like second and third level druids, they feel so much more well-rounded. They feel so much more approachable, right? I'm looking at these and going, okay, so with these particular druids early on, their whole purpose was to give me something more to play towards when I choose this character. It was to me, this feels like one of the most fleshed out classes I could choose, right? Because I could be a fighter for any reason. I could be a cleric for any reason and follow any god. But the way that they laid out what the whole point of the druid was, it makes me feel like they were trying to give a player the openness to be what they wanted to be in game, while also giving them a very good guidebook to a new style of gameplay, to a new approach to in-game interactions, right? Being able to go to these secret meetings and meet people and decide who you're going to challenge and decide which direction you're going to go and whose position that you want, and having these built-in plot hooks that don't necessarily need to tie back into the campaign is just something that I really wish we would have seen more. I don't necessarily think every class needs it, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more of these, like these kind of built-in ideologies of, you have more important things to do than just go loot dungeons and kill dragons.
Yeah, very much so. And I keep seeing it all over the place, and I think that honestly, a lot of D&D in general got repopularized around the time of COVID, around the time of Stranger Things, around the time of, needing a new outlet for things. And I think a lot of things shifted from, kind of like the fourth edition video gaming mindset, like, hey, I want to go kill things. Hey, I want to go feel powerful. And I totally get that. But a lot of the times I feel like there's an element that was forgotten about D&D being the goal, because I've had a couple of videos where I've watched recently. It's like, what's the goal of D&D? How do you win D&D? And it's like, you don't, man. Like, the whole purpose is to tell a great story, is to have fun, it's to develop a character, it's to go out and be a thing, not necessarily be better, but to just go embody something that's outside of yourself. And I think that this right here is another reason why I love Druid so much, just in general, is because I feel like there's so much potential for that, in very, very broad ways. You can either go the wild shape route, you can go the nature route, you can go the magic route, you can go the support route, and like you can combine any of these things together to create something more unique, to create a character that you can run with and play with. And so I don't know, I very much love that they have or at the very least that there's content throughout the history of what druids were that would enable us to go do these things. So I'm definitely here for it. Like, I'm excited that all this content is here. Like, genuinely speaking, like, I didn't know a lot of the background about where druids came from, how these things happened, and like I want to use a lot of this for the foundation of what my druids look like, you know. So
yeah,
you know, one of these days it's gonna turn into a whole thing. But I'm excited that it's here, right? I'm excited that like this is something that we can like pull from and turn into something new. So you know, I'm here for it.
So it's not able to see who all put in, like, it won't give me the stats on the community challenge.
Oh, really?
Just because it's just a straight crowd-funded option. So I'm trying to see if I can get more details on it.
Well, in the future, I'll only be able to track what we get submitted to us during stream, but in the future I can basically record who does what on what stream, because I do steal a lot of chat, and I make note of it. So
actually what I could do is let's go community challenge. What's that one called? Ah.
there we go.
No.
Still no?
I can't. That's my subs. It won't even let me find out. Yeah, it won't even give me a summary of who's put towards it.
Lame.
That's super lame. Okay, so
At the very least, know that this was not Hecate's first donation to that.
no, I'm pretty sure Hecate's been like Hecate, I think, has guaranteed the most put in. It's unfortunate that we won't be able to, without manually doing it. It's
track that.
unfortunate we won't be able to track it, because I was really hoping to track that very easily. Like I could just come into the challenge after the fact and see, you know, who did what.
Yeah.
But it absolutely.
I mean, it feels like it would be easy enough to do, but
let me
it might be worth looking into. See if anybody else has figured out a way to do something like that.
you know, let me try something. I wonder, does the leaderboard show it? No, that's just how much they've gained. And that's not even channel points. No, that's the wrong
thing. So
that's unfortunate.
I'm curious if there's a thing you could make them purchase. Well, it's just a donation. Yeah,
because it doesn't even show my activity feed when people donate to that one specifically. It just.
So let me ask you this: do people add points to that when they do things like give us posture checks?
No.
So that's stuff
specific.
You have to donate.
Gift. Yeah.
Just okay.
And it only pops up in chat. So, okay, we will have to solve that problem later. But we're still getting the extra stream. So I will post about that. I just made a note about it in Discord. So I will post this weekend about the extra stream. We'll figure out a date. We'll figure out a topic. And then we will post about whatever we need, whether it's a poll or we'll just reach out individually to get an idea of what we want to do for that. But yeah, congratulations, y'all. I will get another one of those started before Monday, so we will have that ready for stream. But yeah, that was it. That was the entire history of Druid, Wild Shape.
We did quite a bit. We did quite a bit.
Hierarchies, Druid circles, like that. That was one of the most. I don't know which one changed more, Bard or Druid. Druid was very complicated in its changes, but I don't know if it had as many.
I'll say
drastic changes.
There's definitely more elements that changed, but then again, there's just, I wouldn't even say there's more elements to Druid. There's just, well, I mean, it's probably quantifiable. I'm just not 100% sure at this moment, but yeah, my leaning is towards Druid right now.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think,
but
Druid had a lot more going with it. It's just like, it really did feel like Bard every edition changed something, right? It seemed like with Bard they were constantly making adjustments, and it seems like with Druid it was like the biggest adjustments were from old to new in terms of like the requirements for the hierarchy, but the hierarchy didn't change too much. It just got kind of redefined, and we got some cool spells, and Wild Shape did change a lot.
Yes,
but I feel
definitely.
Like I feel like Wild Shape was the biggest thing that changed. Whereas at least with Druids, you got to remember or Bards, they started out as like, what was it? They started out as Druidic spells. Then they moved over to their spell casting list changed every edition. Not just expanded, but literally the type of spellcaster they were changed every edition. The bardic inspiration changed every edition. The music abilities changed every edition. Like, I don't know. Bard may still be the most drastic of all of the classes, but I do feel that Druid is definitely the most involved. In terms of like the changes over the years. It feels like this used to be a lot more involved, and I kind of miss that. I kind of, it's kind of unfortunate Druids they don't feel nearly as involved.
Yeah,
they kind of feel like just pick it up and you're doing whatever you want to do.
I get why, but I definitely believe that there are some aspects that I wish we still got to play with a little bit, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's great. I am super happy with that one, and I hope you all are happy with that one. We went a whole almost 4 hours, so I think we are pretty good for Friday. I think that was a good one. I guess next week we will have the history of alignment, because that was the other option that people got to.
Oh, okay. Right on.
History of alignment. We'll have plenty more for that moving forward. I'm really liking the history of. I wouldn't mind having a different type of topic where I'm not just, reading off a bunch of notes. Like, it is nice, and I do love these topics, but it would be nice to
we definitely get to dive into it a little bit, but doing a little I
just miss doing like the
spontaneous.
Yeah, I just miss openly talking and like theorizing. This stuff is really nice because it's more like trying to conceptualize, but I do kind of miss like just the tangents.
And we can always branch out. We don't have to keep doing history ofs. Listen, the history ofs, they're gonna be here forever. Like,
oh, I know. Then we're gonna have to do new history ofs between 2014 5th edition and like 9 different 5th editions we're gonna have.
We do history of updates,
right? Like the recent history of.
Yes.
All right, y'all. Well, that is going to be us for the rest of tonight. It's been fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining us. We've had so many people here. I mean, Cosmic was here earlier. We've had Hecate the whole time. Hoylepa showed up earlier. Soul Guild was here for a while. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody else? I think that was it. I think it was just mostly you guys, a couple other, viewers out there, but we do appreciate everybody for showing up. We did get the community challenge, so there will be a extra stream next month.
Sweet.
We'll be posting about that in Discord this weekend. So if you guys want, you guys can join the Discord, join the community, post topics for us to talk about, post homebrew for us to review, or otherwise just chit chat with us. You can do that in Discord. Link is now in chat if you want to join. If you liked this and missed anything, or if you want to see any of our previous live streams, we do have those on YouTube on our VODs channel. And we're also on every social media platform out there. So if you want, there is a link to our link tree that has basically all our socials on it. Go ahead and check that out. Check out our VODs channel, check out our main channel where we post shorts. We also post them on TikTok as well. So, like, subscribe, do all the things. You know where to find us now. That is going to be us. We will be back on Monday for another homebrew review. Do we know what
Yes,
we have?
indeed. This upcoming Monday, let me take a gander.
Subclass.
It's definitely going to be another subclass. It will be a new subclass. This one is going to be interesting. It is a ranger subclass.
Finally, something new.
It is called the Surface Sentinel. The Surface Sentinel. Okay. Now, I want you to picture in your mind what that looks like, and you're probably going to have to throw it away. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I mean, Surface Sentinel for a ranger, I'm thinking like a ghillie suit sniper is just
interesting.
My mindset is goes to like a ghillie suit sniper.
Interesting.
Like doesn't
I kind of like that vibe.
Position, watch and learn, watch and wait. Like again, Surface Sentinel, because Surface, like I don't know why it wouldn't be anything other than Surface, because Rangers are all about like being up on top. But then you say Surface, and I'm thinking like, okay, surface of the ground. Or surface of a tree. I'm thinking like camouflage. So when I'm thinking Surface Sentinel, I'm thinking you're either defending or waiting in a single position and you're hidden and you are covering an area. So that's all I got.
Okay.
So we'll see. Join us on Monday for the Surface Sentinel.
And this one's actually by Pokeniner.
All right.
Actually by Pokeniner.
So
Bringing it back.
That will be on Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for all of those who want to join us. Otherwise, thank you guys so much. Y'all have been wonderful. We will be back next week. Have a great weekend, guys. It's been fantastic. Let us know what you guys want to hear next as well. Post more topics and post more homebrew. We need it all. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend, guys. Cheers.
Deuces, my friends.